won't forgive him for this.
And I think you just look at what's happening in this country with Caliconey. We can't release his medical
That's
records because
outrageous.
that's disgusting. And I know we missed Axel Rudebuchanan, but we're really sorry. But we're going to give some migrants some PlayStations and make excuses if they get hurty words said. All our priorities are wrong, Kev.
Absolutely, this country is warped and we need to put it right.
And the man who will put it to rights is on next. The legend that is Kev O'Sullivan, a man who makes stripy shirts even correct. Keep your calls coming to him, 0344 499 1000. He's here, text to 87222. Do please start your message with the word talk. Petrie is at 10. I'm going home because I live there. See you soon. Kev O'Sullivan is next on Talk.
There you are. Good evening and welcome to the Political Asylum right here on Talk. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan and I'll be with you for the next 3 thrilling hours of news, views and dynamic debate all the way until 10 o'clock. You know the drill. Get involved, get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000. It's Wednesday, February the 5th. Here's what's coming up. More madness on the migrant front amid new revelations that Labour councils are using taxpayers' money to teach asylum seekers how to report hate crimes. I mean, why? 0344 499 1000. This after yesterday's shock disclosure that councils all over the country last year shelled out a staggering £141 million on luxury freebies for illegal migrants, including PlayStations, driving lessons, DJ lessons, yoga and Tai Chi sessions, and even guided tours around Liverpool FC's legendary Anfield Stadium. When will this utter madness stop? 0344 499 1000. In other news, stand by for a special debate on free speech after a Reform councillor was warned about his language. His crime? Suggesting that the mental health industry was a problem and that claims of anxiety and depression are often the modern equivalent of the bad back. Confected excuses for swinging the lead and claiming welfare benefits. What exactly is wrong with that? What did he say that's so wrong? He was warned moderate your language. Why? 0344 499 1000. Also tonight, outrage as the grieving families of the 3 victims learn that Nottingham killer Valdo Calicone was allowed by the NHS to cease his treatment because of his fear of needles. This plus the fact that the NHS won't release the 200-page report chronicling their catalogue of errors that led to this violent, paranoid schizophrenic roaming the streets because of his right to patient privacy. What about the family's right to justice? 0344 499 1000. Calicone was so dangerous, health visitors were under orders never to see him alone. What a disgrace. 0344 499 1000. Plus, the latest on Gaza after Donald Trump's extraordinary White House press conference in which, alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he outlined his plans to turn the beleaguered Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East. Along the way, he needs to find a new place to live for 2 million Palestinians. Knowing him, he'll come up with something, though. But could this actually happen? Many people believe he's ripped up the copybook and started a whole new debate over there in the most troubled region in the world. What do you reckon? 0344 499 1000. Later, Ben Habib joins me to lament what looks like Manchester police imposing Sharia law on a protester who burned the Quran. Why is that illegal? Any ideas? 0344 499 1000. We don't have blasphemy laws in this country, even though sections of our Muslim community would like them to come back. We abandoned them, quite rightly, in 2008 because they're ridiculous and medieval. If you want to burn the Bible or the Jewish Torah or the Quran in this country, freedom of expression, you should be allowed to do that. Why are the Manchester police acting as if you're not allowed to do that? That is an attack on freedom of expression, folks. 0344 499 1000. And the gathering storm as police reveal why they won't be investigating Two Tiers lockdown-busting antics when he was visited by a mask-wearing voice coach in the middle of the strict COVID restrictions. He's a liar, isn't he? He broke the rules. He broke the law, just like Boris Johnson did. Only worse, I would suggest. What do you think? The police have dropped the case because it's over the 3-year limit. In some ways, I kind of like that. I don't want people being done for COVID infringements 3 years hence, 5 years hence, whatever it is. So, but the Prime Minister needs to come clean. He broke the damn rules. He broke the bloody law. We know it. 0344 499 1000. And finally, Starmer's bizarre continued determination to give the strategic Chagos Islands to China's friend Mauritius and hand the lucky Mauritians £18 billion along the way. Why is our undear leader so keen to weaken Britain's power and influence on the world stage? 0344 499 1000. All that and so much more. So don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Wednesday night together. And right off the back, it's Wednesday. So for the first hour, I will be joined by our excellent international editor here at Talk, Isabel Oakeshott. Welcome, Isabel.
Hi. Now, I know the Chagos isn't on I don't think it's on our list, but I really hope you have a good debate about that. And in particular, I'd like to know how our listeners feel about the fact that the Prime Minister today hinted that he knows something that he can't tell us that means that all of this makes great sense and he has to do it. He hinted that the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, also knows or should know this great big secret. I say that this is no time for that secret. If we, the taxpayer, are going to be charged billions of pounds to give away our strategic asset, then I think we need to know what this big secret is, don't you?
Yeah, if there is one, knowing him, it's just
Making it up.
weasel words to get himself out of a complete mess. I think this is him and his North London lawyer mates, Liberal Guardian reading mates, like that idiot Richard Harmer, our Lord Harmer, made especially into a peer so he could be our Britain-hating Attorney General, who are just fighting against colonialism. They see this as the end of British colonialism. We don't have the right to have any territories. Let's give it to Mauritius. Where is Mauritius? Oh, it's 1,500 miles from the Chagos Islands. They don't particularly want it. What about if we give you 18 billion quid? Oh, all right, we'll think about it. It's just ridiculous. It is these idiot lawyers from North London who think they're taking a stand against imperialism. But if you're right, Isabel, and you could well be, and there's some sort of secret that he's not telling the British public, that's a disgrace. Another affront to democracy by this guy. I'm going to deal with this later on as well, but just before we do move on, your take on the fact that today the police have announced that there will be no investigation into the Prime Minister, or the Labour leader as he was back in 2020, when on Christmas Eve that year, in the middle of very strict COVID restrictions, a voice coach called Leonie Mellinger, actress, travelled on by train from Brighton, first class, to London, across several tiers. London was in strict 4-tier lockdown at that point, went to Labour headquarters and gave him a voice lesson while wearing a mask. That was not essential. She was not a key worker. He broke the COVID rules. There's no doubt whatsoever about that. The police today have announced, well, we're not investigating it because there is actually a law that COVID infringements die out. The statute of limitations on them was 3 years. And in a way, I'm glad about that. I don't want anybody hounded about those ridiculous COVID rules anymore. But this guy, the Prime Minister now, the then Labour leader, let's not put no bones about it. This guy broke the rules, and he's going to tell all rules were obeyed, strict rules were obeyed. You can say it as much as you like, Starmer. You are lying. He is, isn't he?
Oh, 100%. You know, what a load of absolute rubbish that this didn't break the rules. Of course, he wasn't a key worker. You know, once again, the Prime Minister's taking us all for complete fools. We're not. We see right through it. I don't think police resources should have been diverted to investigating this. I hated the whole police involvement in imposing restrictions that we now know, many of which were absolute load of nonsense and completely unnecessary. The police should never have been used in this way then. They certainly shouldn't be used for these political purposes now. But I just wish that politicians, and in particular Prime Ministers, would stop lying to us. Just stop it. You know, we know you broke the rules. Just, you know, don't pretend otherwise. Don't pretend this was something it wasn't. It wasn't necessary. And by the way, it's done you no good whatsoever.
Yeah, and I've got a warning to the body politic in Westminster. Just like Boris Johnson. I mean, Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer are representative of the Westminster elite who genuinely, during those COVID days, thought that the rules were for the little people, for the ordinary people, but not for them. They learnt to their dismay that actually they were for them as well. But they were ridiculous rules, and my warning to this lot, to the Westminster gang, the bubble boys and girls, don't you ever put those restrictions on us again, because you try that one more time and we will not play ball. It's as simple as that, right?
Oh, 100%. I say never forgive, never forget what happened. You know what? There are so many people still paying a terrible price for those unnecessary lockdowns, including and in particular children. There's a generation that has been indelibly harmed by those restrictions. Some people lost their lives as a result of those restrictions. Not just a small number of people, very significant numbers of people whose other health conditions went ignored as the NHS was totally diverted to try to contain this respiratory infection that could never be contained in the way that the government tried to do it. It is one of the greatest atrocities of our modern times. And as you say, we're not falling for that again. Don't even think about ever trying to do that to our nation again.
And just one last point. On Christmas Eve 2020, while he's having fun with his mask-wearing vocal coach, we, the general public, were not allowed to spend Christmas with our loved ones. We're not even allowed to go around and say hello to our next door neighbours. Weren't allowed out of our houses. He thought the rules were for us and not him. Remember that, folks. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Let's quickly talk about what I think is the latest horror in the ongoing farce, the sick comedy of Britain's handling of our migrant crisis. Well, yesterday, you know that it emerged that councils all over the country are shelling out, or last year shelled out £141 million on luxury freebies for illegal migrants, including playstations, DJ lessons, driving lessons, yoga and Tai Chi sessions, cooking courses, and even a guided tour around Liverpool FC's Anfield Stadium, and so on and so forth. That's shocking, absolutely shocking. Guess what's emerged today, Isabel? That at least 4 Labour councils spent taxpayers' money on training courses, teaching illegal migrants how to report hate crimes. What is that about?
What are we doing here? And when I say we, I don't mean those people that listen to us and agree with us on these matters. What are these councils and publicly paid officials thinking? I don't get it. How is it that they can sit round in a committee room and agree with each other that this is a valid way to pay the money created by hard-working people, doing the vast majority of tax payers, having to work all hours for not a great deal of return, and then seeing their money squandered in this way, while essential public services are just absolutely down in the doldrums. It is a complete and utter travesty. And I think this is one of the reasons why some people may be quite exercised by the cancellation of so many local elections, because where is our power? We want to be able to kick these idiots out, don't we? These idiots that are abusing our trust in this way, that are just wasting our money. The one power that we have in a democracy is to get rid of these morons. And yet this government, Keir Starmer and his colleagues, have just stripped us of that little bit of power that we have in so many parts of the country. People are going to have to wait to punish these idiots.
And do you know what it all is? Donald Trump brilliantly makes no bones about it, keeps saying America first, America first. Over here, under that weasel Keir Starmer and his useless sixth form student-style political cabinet, it's Britain last. That's their policy, Britain last. Just before we move on, one last thing to discuss with the migrant crisis. This is extraordinary. The Public Accounts Committee in Parliament, a committee of MPs, has chronicled this is a quote, a dysfunctional culture of repeated mistakes and weak internal challenge. This is about the Home Office, and it's also about the then Tory government. Basically, the Home Office has wasted nearly £100 million on fatuous plans to house asylum seekers, including, and I followed this story, I covered this story at great length with a big campaigner against it, and this was the bid to convert the derelict asbestos-ridden North Eye prison near Bexhill in Sussex into a vast sort of home for barracks for migrants. The government bought this pile of rubble for £15.4 million, and it was never used, ever. and they abandoned it about 3 months ago. I think they sold it at a great loss. Also, £34 million went on the ill-fated Bibby Stockholm barge, which was never full and was towed out of Portland Harbour in Dorset last week. And £60 million was invested in the former Dam Busters airbase at RAF Scrampton, but was never, ever used. This was all for accommodation for migrants. And on the committee making these disastrous decisions, this was the then Tory government, were, you know, that great campaigner for a crackdown on this migrant madness, Robert Jenrick, and of course the famous Oliver Dowden. I mean, this is a toxic combination of useless civil servants and pathetic politicians. That's why we are in such trouble with this migrant crisis.
Well, we're in such trouble because they just don't have a clear set of principles on it, do they? The principles should be very simple. Only a very, very limited number of obviously very desperate people should be allowed in with the consent of the British public. So, for example, most people, I think, supported the Ukraine refugee scheme, and those who come in and break the law should be sent back. And as for scrabbling around for endless different imaginative forms of accommodation, it's the wrong answer to the problem. We wouldn't need all this accommodation if we actually stopped the illegal migration in the first place.
Yeah, exactly right. So the North Eye prison fiasco, the guy who was fighting that campaign became a regular guest of mine, very clever guy. And he said, look, I keep telling them, I've told the government, I've told Robert Jenrick, I've told Oliver Dowden that your problem with this pile of bricks that used to be a prison is it is covered in asbestos. You're never going to make it inhabitable. Now, they bought it from a developer who thought about sort of speculating with it. A developer bought it a couple of years ago for the whole site. It's a big site for something like about £8 million. And
doubled his money because
and the government came in amid all these. No, this is a mistake. No. They bought it for 15.4 million, and I think they've just had to sell it back for about 8 million. It's pathetic. Yeah. It's pathetic.
It is utterly pathetic. I mean, what can you say about these types of errors? It's just again and again and again. Stop seeking more accommodation for illegal migrants. This is a whole industry now.
Yeah, and you know why they were doing it, Isabel? What North Eye and RAF Scrampton and all that were all about. This is when Rishi and the gang thought, well, this is a really good policy. This will get the public right behind us. Instead of spending £7 million a night on hotels, we'll put the migrants in cheaper accommodation centres. No, Rishi, no, Robert, no, Oliver. What we want you to do is to stop the bloody migrants coming here in the first place. Honestly, it just drives me mad.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really complicated, is it? You know, but as I say, there are now people making vast fortunes off this. There are agents who go out seeking down accommodation that could be converted into homes for asylum seekers. This is insanity. We are basically committing a kind of national self-harm with this. I could put it even more strongly. And it has got to stop, but it isn't going to stop under this government.
It certainly isn't. Listen, we're going to go to break now, Isabel. When we come back, we're going to be joined by a Reform councillor from North Lincolnshire who's got a very troubling story to tell, which I think cuts to the heart of Britain's war on free speech. The Labour movement, Labour government, Labour politicians, left-wing politicians, they don't like freedom of speech, and they certainly don't like people who are right of centre exercising their freedom of speech. We'll talk about that after the break.
feel bad that people have bad lives, but the response in the in the comments and social media, whatever, was, "I'm sorry you have a bad life. Sorry, you broke the rules. We're done." Your tears are not going to change our policy. We had a record number of people cross the border under Biden. We set a new record. We now have a higher foreign-born population in the U.S. than we did back during the peak in from 1890 to 1920.
Welcome back. I'm still with our international editor here at Talk, Isabel Oakeshott, but we're going to be joined now for what I think is an important discussion. We're going to talk about freedom of speech, and we're going to talk to someone who's been on the wrong end of what I think is a kind of sickness in our society, that if you want to say something that some people might consider to be, I don't know, slightly right of centre, or doesn't really conform to the new way of be kind and all that sort of thing. In other words, if you want to say something that is full of common sense, that might not be allowed, and that is a problem in this country. We are stamping on people who say things that are full of common sense because the Be Kind Liberals Guardian readers don't like it. So a warm welcome to Reform Councillor in North Lincolnshire. He's also was a Reform candidate in the general election for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes. Oliver Freeston. Welcome, Oliver.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm very, very good. Thanks for joining us. Well, why don't you tell us your story? Now, you're the deputy chair, I think, of your Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Panel.
That's right.
And not to preempt your story, but I've read what you said. And you basically, to summarise what you said, look, obviously people have mental health issues and we've got to take them seriously, and, but what genuine cases, we have to be generous and kind to them. However, you said that you fear, and I think most people would agree with you, that there's a kind of mental health industry going on now, and that in fact when people say, I've got anxiety, I've depression, that often that is the modern equivalent of what used to be the bad back. They are used as excuses to swing the lead and often claim benefits and welfare. So you expressed that fear. I've read what you said. You said it in very, very reasonable terms. And later on, you were pulled up about it and told to moderate your language. Tell your story, Oliver.
Yeah, so the attack on free speech, it's infected every level of government. I'm a local councillor. I was in the health scrutiny panel, and I said, having been somebody with an experience in the health and social care background, I've seen firsthand what it's like for people with a genuine case of anxiety and depression. But I said that it's become too common now. People are throwing it around far too flippantly, with children aged 8, 9, 10 years old going to teachers saying, "Miss, I'm depressed." And I know this because I speak to teachers firsthand. Children shouldn't know what depression is. They should be out playing with their friends, enjoying life. But that's the problem with the world we're now in, that it's almost become fashionable to be depressed. But there's also other reasons why people will go and say, I've got anxiety and depression, because they know full well if they go to their GP and say, I've got anxiety and depression, I can't go to work, they will get signed off for it. There was 18 million lost work days due to just poor mental health alone last year.
No, well, so you're. The point is, Oliver, no sensible person would argue for a second with anything you're saying. We full well know what's going on. There is a real problem in this country generally, and I'm sure in your area as well as every other area, with people who know how to game the system. They know how to play the system. You go to someone, I'm depressed, I've got anxiety. Suicidal thoughts is a common excuse as well, and that immediately gets you signed off. So people are doing this. I mean, not in every case. You've got to take every case seriously, but we should be sceptical always. So that's what you're saying. And then afterwards, you were told to moderate your language. Explain what happened.
That's right. So I got an email from a council officer and they said that some people were offended by my words. Well, I'm afraid we're adults, we're having grown-up conversation. And if you're going to be offended by somebody's words, which I have every right to say, I'm elected not to be PC, but to say what the silent majority are thinking, and I'll continue to say it. So I was told, a friendly warning, can you try and moderate your language? Especially as chair, you're expected to toe the line almost. Well, I've got news for you. I'm a reformer. We don't toe the line. We say what people think, and we will continue to say what people think. So I'm very much looking forward to the next meeting where I can bring this up again. Afterwards, I did go and speak to other people, other reform members, neighbours, friends, and said, was I out of line there with what I said? But there was a general consensus of support. In fact, I had a message privately, and there was a chap who said, one of my family members took their own life. And I thought, oh, we touched a nerve. He said, but I'm fully behind you with your comments. I see it, people at work saying they've got anxiety, depression, other forms of mental health, because they know that they can get something out of it. They can get days off work and other benefits from that. So I think we do need to become real with mental health, because whatever we're doing at the moment, it's not working. And as I said to you earlier, I worked in the field before. I see that people would come in, sometimes with the right intentions, because they genuinely were sad. But what we've got to remember is sadness is a feeling. You can't be depressed unless you're medically diagnosed with it. And that's something that people forget when they say, I'm depressed. No, you're not. You're sad. Everybody gets sad, and it's okay to be sad. But we need to show some British resilience, and I'll get onto that in a moment. We need to show some resilience.
Does that still exist?
Well, that's the problem, is that we need to show some resilience and pick yourself up, dust yourself off, get over life's adversities. Life can be tough. I've gone through tough things in life. We all have. But you dust yourself off, you pick yourself up, and you get on with it.
The thing is, Oliver, you know, I've read what you said at the meeting, and you know, it's utterly reasonable and, may I say, utterly moderate. And no sensible person in this entire country would disagree with what you said. And if we don't confront the reality of this crisis, and by the way, the welfare crisis is spinning out of control. It may well be the biggest crisis facing this nation right now. Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, is under enormous pressure to reduce our welfare bill. And the reason our welfare bill is so high is we're paying loads of money to people who are frankly lying. People are being signed off work for life. You know, young people sort of your age, in their 20s, are being signed off work for life after an assessment on the phone. It's unbelievable what's going on. But the issue here is you've put your case in a very reasonable way. I think people can see that you're a very reasonable man as well. And yet it was seen as some kind of horrible, horrific infringement of the kind of language we're allowed to use right now. Isabel, this is a very serious issue of free speech, isn't it?
I was really shocked when I heard what had happened to Oliver, and that he had been warned off, that effectively, you know, shadowy figures were complaining about him behind his back and his supposedly unacceptable language. What the hell kind of world have we got ourselves into, where you can't have a reasonable debate about what does and doesn't constitute mental health problems, what is and isn't really depression? These are entirely legitimate discussions to have about a problem that, as we've just been saying, is a huge burden on the state. And it's just awful if our elected representatives are not able to speak freely on these matters. And I'm just so pleased that Oliver has stood up and said, listen, I'm not going to be browbeaten. I'm not going to be cowed. I'm going to carry on saying what I think, because it is what millions of people up and down the country are thinking. And that is his duty as somebody who's been voted into that position. And you've got to be brave on this stuff. And it's just a shame that it takes courage to say things that, well, most people are really thinking, aren't they?
Absolutely. Listen, we're going to go to break now. And when we come back, let's have a general chat about these dark clouds that seem to be gathering over this country. More and more we're told not to say this, you can't say this, you can't say that. It's a particular problem for me because I don't have much of a filter, you might have noticed. But seriously, why shouldn't I say what I think, even if it shocks you and offends you? That shouldn't be a reason why I shouldn't say it, particularly if it happens to be true, like what Oliver said. And by the way, I mean, I could read you exactly what he did say, but it's quite long. But trust me, if you're stupid enough to trust me, no, seriously, trust me, it is absolutely moderate and reasonable. And he's being told he can't speak like that. And I think that cuts to the heart of a massive general problem we've got in modern Britain. We'll talk more about that after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm still talking to Isabella Oakeshott, Talk's international editor, and also a Reform councillor in North Lincolnshire, Oliver Freeston. We're talking about freedom of speech. Listen, this is what worries me. What's going on in this country now, the sort of thing that happened to you, Oliver, it's sort of Orwellian. And we have a Labour government, we have a left-leaning culture that I think wants to take the power away from the people by limiting our language. You know, it literally was in 1984. If you take away the words to express what the government doesn't want, we won't be able to express it. We are weakened. I mean, on a small level, you know, yesterday I think it was, it emerged that the NHS is banning the word obese, having already banned the word fat, because that's offensive to people. So they come up with a euphemism, obese, and then here we are 10 years on. The euphemism is so associated with fat that they're now banning the euphemism. How do doctors treat fat people, fatsos, see the rules I'm breaking here, if they're not allowed to say fat or obese? So that is, I think, medically dangerous. Then we have a process going on now, administered by the great Angela Rayner, where we already have, in my view, an unnecessary definition of Islamophobia, which shouldn't even be a word, I don't think, but they're redefining it again. So there'll be a new definition which will reduce what we will be allowed to say legally about Islam, about the Muslim community, our views on whether or not women should wear burqas, and so on and so forth. It will reduce our linguistic ability to discuss issues that are important to this country. You're a young guy, Oliver. Do you sense that you're growing up in a worrying culture in terms of what I've just been describing?
And the problem is you've got people of an older generation who are getting offended by hurty words. But moreover, my words weren't hurty. The bigger problem is the Tories. You said about Labour. This is the Tories as well. Two Tory councillors came up to me after the meeting, after not saying anything in the meeting, and they said, "Oh, you were brave to say that." I said, "Oh, do you not agree with the comments?" "Oh, no, we agree 100%, but you can't say things like that anymore." That is what has got us into this mess. We've got a generation after generation of politicians who have been afraid to speak sense, and now look at us. We're in a position where you can't say things that are actually for the benefit of people. And just going back to my original point on the mental health, how many people do you think are suffering because they've been stigmatized and they've got genuine mental health problems and really do need help, because they don't want to call out, because they don't want to be labelled as, anxiety and depressed, because it's just lost its meaning. People don't take any notice of it anymore.
I believe, Isabel, that there's something like 9 million working age people in this country who don't work, have been signed off or just don't work. So Oliver's quite right. We have a massive crisis here, and Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, is under enormous pressure to reduce our just astronomical and rising welfare bill. But she can't do it because of what Oliver's talking about, because as soon as somebody phones up and says, I'm 22 years old, can I not work for the rest of my life, please, because I'm having suicidal thoughts? Yeah, all right, yeah, OK, you're all right, off you go. Doctors, we know, just write the notes rather than get involved. So there's a massive problem here. But to go to my general point, Isabel, this restriction on language, oh, you can't say that, you can't say that. As I say, what Oliver said at that meeting was a modicum of reasonableness. And yet he's told you can't say that. It's very worrying the way more and more we get told you can't say that, you can't say that, you can't say that. And it's usually because, oh, why can't I say that? Oh, because it's offensive. Well, my response to that is, so what? It's not against the law to be offensive.
Yeah, I mean, the more people tell me I can't say things, the more I want to say them. I spent an
That's why I have you on the show.
I spent an hour last night talking to somebody who deals exactly with this, doing the assessments for so-called PIP payments, which is up to £1,000 a month, so-called personal. Personal empowerment payments or something like that. It's supposed to be money to help people who are genuinely disabled have more control over their lives. And he told me in great deal exactly how the system works or doesn't work. And he was exasperated that he doesn't ever actually get to see these people who he's assessing over the phone. They can claim anything they like, really. They have to produce various bits of evidence. But he said, if I could just see these people face to face, I'd know within a nanosecond whether they really needed these allowances or not. But doing it over the phone is just no substitute for that. Yeah. And he further said that, get this, some 60% of the cases that he's dealing with, these are the claims for this PIP benefit, £1,000 a month, are mental health claims. Yeah. I mean, what the hell? How has this happened? And he said it's just basically impossible to know how to judge it. People say that they can't get out of bed, they can't eat. He does his very best to probe it, as they call it in the terminology, but it's very difficult.
And there are buzzwords that you can use, and nobody's saying that everybody is. Yeah, but nobody's saying that everybody's lying. But let me tell you, quite a few of them are. You say suicidal thoughts, yet you're at home and dry. And I was just wondering, Oliver, whether I'd just gone a bit over the top, as I'm wont to do in those figures, but I've just looked it up. In December 2024, so not that long ago, so just well, 2 months ago, there were 9,337,000 people aged between 16 and 64. In other words, working age people who are not working, economically inactive. And so when you made that point in your council meeting, it's a vital point to be made. If we don't weed out the people who are lying to get a lifetime of benefits, this nation literally is going to go bankrupt. These are massive, massive, unsustainable figures, and that's why Liz Kendall is under such pressure. She is the cabinet minister who is having the hardest time right now, being lent on left, right and centre, but she has got a hell of a mountain to climb, right?
Well, if Isabel was aghast at the figures she was told by the person she interviewed at the PIP assessment, did you know now that to get a blue badge, mental health, anxiety is now a qualifying criteria? And when I saw that, I was shocked. You tell me how having anxiety or depression means you should be eligible for a blue badge. The world has gone crazy.
Well, I mean, next thing we hear, you'll also be eligible for a Motability car, because you've mental health problems. And again, I wish that was just fantasy, crazy fiction, but, I wouldn't be that surprised if that becomes a reality or if it isn't already.
What this all comes down to is, again, it's this sort of new be kind tyranny where you're not allowed to sort of call a spade or to tell somebody, read them the riot act, so it would be fun, wouldn't it, if a few doctors would say, don't come in here telling me you're suicidally depressed. I can see you're lying. You've still got your football boots on. Get out of here and get a job. But they can't do that. And this is the problem. We have lost the ability to address reality with the language that is required, because that's offensive. You can't say that. Listen, Oliver, I'm going to have to go now, but it's great to have you on the show, and we got your number, and I think we might have you back if you're agreeable to that. Would you come back on the show?
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Thank you very much. Oliver Freeston there. He's a Reform councillor in North Lincolnshire. What do you think about what he's saying? 03444 499 1000. We'll go to break now, Isabel, and when we come back, we'll talk about this terrible case of Valdo Calicone, the Nottingham killer. And once again, all the breaks and the kindness he's being shown by our authorities, while the victims, his victims' families, are being shut out and not shown any kindness, not shown any charity. It's unbelievable. We'll talk about that after these messages. Stay exactly where you are.
Yeah, and absolutely. Angela Rayner's been talking today about how she's going to have to raise the council tax threshold. She's going to let councils charge you more for not bringing your bins in, not keeping the streets clean. So councils across the country are apparently all going bust. And you're telling me there's £141 million just lying around in their back pocket to spend on things like video games consoles and Pilates classes. I mean, I know we shouldn't laugh, but that is a serious amount of money. It goes without saying. We forget when we talk about these government sums, $1 billion here, $1 billion there.
I'm a local councillor. I was in the health scrutiny panel, and I said, having been somebody with an experience in the health and social care background, I've seen firsthand what it's like for people with a genuine case of anxiety and depression. But I said that it's become too common now. People are throwing it around far too flippantly. We have children aged 8, 9, 10 years old going to teachers saying, "Miss, I'm depressed." And I know this because I speak to teachers firsthand. Children shouldn't know what depression is.
In just a little while after the 8 o'clock news, we'll be going live to the Middle Eastern Riviera, where construction on Trump Tower Gaza has already begun. No, I'm just joking. But we will be discussing the President's extraordinary press conference last night at the White House alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in which he laid out a very different vision for the future of that troubled strip there in the Middle East. So we'll talk about that later on. It was really, really interesting. I went home and sort of thought, oh, boring press conference. Sat until about 2 in the morning, transfixed. I tell you, those two guys, they have smashed the orthodoxy when it comes to talking about the future of that benighted area. So we'll talk about that after the 8 o'clock news. But as for now, I'm still with our international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Now, Isabel, unlike some people, we don't wait for press conferences on this show. So we went straight to one of the victims' fathers last night, Dr. Sanjay Kumar, who's the victim of poor Grace O'Malley Kumar, one of the 3 people slaughtered, knifed to death by Valdo Calicone in June 23 during that day of terror in Nottingham. Just before we discuss what happened today, here is Dr. Kumar talking about how the families continue to suffer this terrible injustice on the part of the authorities. Have a listen.
We are going to take huge steps, again, for public safety, to see that someone like him is never released. His sentence should be re-reviewed. What we wanted was a hybrid order. We never minded him getting the medical treatment that he may need acutely, but ultimately he should have got a life sentence for murdering 3 people and our daughter. 3 innocent people were murdered in the cold light of day, and this man deserves a life sentence. He's evil. He should never be let in. And the people who kept this evil person out, the psychiatrists who were responsible for keeping this evil person out in the community, to murder.
You are, Isabel. That's Grace O'Malley Kumar's distraught father. And, you know, but first of all, the trial of this guy, Valdo Calicone, was a disgrace in itself. Technically, he's not a murderer. He was allowed to plead diminished responsibility manslaughter and therefore sent off to a cushy medical unit, prison hospital, you know, where he's having quite a nice life. And as the mother of the boy, Greg, who was killed, she said this wasn't a trial, this was a trial by doctors. So first of all, Dr. Kumar saying this guy's a murderer. He murdered 3 people and yet officially he's not a murderer. And now we learnt yesterday that the NHS will not release the 200-page report file on the catalogue of errors that led to this monster, this paranoid, schizophrenic, violent monster wandering the streets of Nottingham because of his right to patient privacy, patient confidentiality. What about the rights of the damn families? And also, it turns out that amid this catalogue of disastrous errors, one of the reasons that he was allowed to cease his vital treatment was because he had a fear of needles. So the NHS basically said, oh, well, all right then, off you go. He was so dangerous that health visitors were under strict orders never to go to see him alone because he was so violent. But the NHS just let him out, let him wander the streets, and the rest is macabre history, as we know. These families have been treated appallingly. That report needs to be released, and I think we need a retrial. We need to put that bloke back on trial and do him for what he should have been done, which is the vile, vicious murder of 3 innocent people.
Yeah, I mean, haven't the families been magnificent over the way they've handled all of this? They're not just going to take it as it's come to them. They are fighting every step of the way so that this can't happen again. And, you know, the tragedy is it probably will. And it feels funny, doesn't it? Odd to be talking about this guy on the back of that discussion we've just had about all the people fraudulently claiming to have mental health problems. I mean, this guy, Victor Calacane, was the ultimate nutter. This guy really, really did have very, very serious mental health problems and didn't get, he wasn't treated in the way that he ought to have been. In other words, kept well away from the public so that he couldn't do any kind of harm. And there'd been several incidents where he had inflicted terror on people. He kept his own flatmates captive. He terrorized, I think, one woman who jumped out of a window. She was so afraid of what he might do to her. So it was a truly, truly shocking case, this. And it's good that, we are learning as much as possible about what went wrong. And I don't know, are you sure the latest is that report has not been released in full? Because I think there might have been...
No, there are a few pages. It's a 200-page report. I believe 6 pages have become available.
Well, that's great. Isn't that special? Of course the whole thing should be released. I've got no interest in his confidentiality, no interest in protecting him whatsoever. And it just utterly ludicrous that he should have been allowed not to take very, very beneficial medication because he was afraid of needles. Come on, this is a guy that ultimately went around stabbing people. He wasn't afraid of sharp, pointy things, was he?
But also, Isabel, this is a classic case. Once again, what is wrong with this country? We always get it wrong. Why are we protecting and being kind to the monster who murdered 3 people and being very unkind and unreasonable to the poor, grieving relatives, the loved ones of the victims? It's ridiculous.
Well, it happens so much, doesn't it? Where people want to find out, for example, what happened to their lost loved ones, and the phone companies won't release their phone records, even though the person's dead. Some kind of confidentiality thing. We have to get a sense of perspective here about what really matters and who really matters. And it is the living and the innocent who matter in these cases, not violent psychos who are claiming to be afraid of needles. Give me strength.
It really is getting ridiculous, isn't it? Let's finally tackle you on our friend Axel Ruder-Cabana. Dan Jarvis, the Home Office Minister, today stood up in Parliament and said, bombshell news. Bombshell news. He conceded that just maybe the Prevent scheme, the assessors for the Prevent scheme, now anti-extremism scheme, might have screwed up a bit, not referring him to that de-radicalisation scheme. Well, it's like, Dan, why did you even waste your own time, let alone ours, telling us the bleeding obvious that this was a complete mess from start to finish, including Keir Starmer's cover-up of the fact that he was a terrorist?
Yeah, I mean, what an embarrassment to actually have to announce this. Oh, yeah, you don't say that maybe the Prevent programme kind of failed to do its core offer, which is prevent things, and that maybe this guy probably should have been kept within the project. And, to have to stand up and admit that a week after sentencing is pretty lame, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's pretty politely as I can at this time of the evening.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're going to come back next week, Isabel. I'll try and find a story where the government has done something right, but don't bet the farm on it. Good to talk to you, as always. Thank you. That was Isabel Oakeshott. Back in a minute with Gaza. Welcome back. This is the second hour of tonight's Political Asylum. Much still to come. I'll be joined by Ben Habib in half an hour. We have a lot to talk about. But before that, around about 20 past, the floor is open to you. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Just give us a call about anything you want to discuss. Should Keir Starmer be prosecuted? He broke the COVID rules. He broke the lockdown rules after all his parsimonious, sanctimonious statements about how I got to pay the rules and Boris Johnson didn't. He broke them. Shouldn't he face justice? Apparently it's out of limitations, statute of limitations, no more COVID convictions. I've got some sympathy with that. I don't want people being convicted all these years on for those ridiculous rules, breaking those ridiculous rules. You bring him in again, you lot in Westminster, and we'll all break them. You have been warned. We're not putting up with that crap ever again. Let me know what you think about that. What do you think about the fact that Labour councils have been spending your money, taxpayers' money, teaching migrants, illegal migrants, how to report hate crimes, probably against you. 0344 499 1000. And shouldn't Valdo Calaconi's medical records be released? Why are we prioritising his alleged right to patient privacy over the rights of the grieving families of the three people he murdered, he stabbed to death in Nottingham in June 2023? 0344 499 1000. Later on in the show, you might want to talk about this next item, because I got home last night after the show, after another brilliant show, winding down a bit. I was watching telly. On came the press conference in the White House with Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, the first foreign leader to visit the new president in Washington. And I thought, this will be boring. This will be, we stand for Foursquare together, for, some sort of declaration of continued diplomatic allied unity and so on and so forth. But it was far from that. It was extraordinary. They laid out a blueprint for the future of the Middle East that was quite frankly astonishing. We've seen the pictures, we'll see them now, of Gaza's pretty much been razed to the ground, levelled, everything's gone. Donald's idea, and Benjamin seems to like it too, BB as they call him, is to basically just develop, get rid of all the Palestinians. This is a thing that's been going around today, Trump Tower in Gaza. Trust me, Donald would like to build hotels on this prime real estate, as he calls it. But basically, it's to develop Gaza in this kind of way, make it into a luxury kind of resort type area, because it's got a beautiful beach. The potential is massive. And for the 2 million Palestinians who sort of live there, a lot of them been out for some time now, but they're kind of returning, find them somewhere else to live. In other words, Gaza is no longer the home of the Palestinians. It's a sort of international, as he said, world people will live there or go there for vacations and whatever. He'll probably no doubt build a golf course. I don't think it's that bad a thing that he might want to cash in. Why shouldn't he? He's a property developer. But he calls it the Riviera of the Middle East. It's a seismic plan that they're serious about. Now, in the Spectator today, excellent article by journalist Jonathan Sacerdoti, who joins me now. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi, Kevin. How are you doing? I'm
all right. My jaw hit the ground as I was watching that. I thought it'd be boring, and I stayed up till the very end. It was riveting, and as you wrote, it's like, why not? Because all we've done now for decades, for 50 years of dismay, is this sort of orthodoxy. Will there be a two-state solution and we've got to sort this out and this out? None of it has worked. All it has resulted in is flare-ups of war and conflict, the worst of which we've just seen for the past year or so, for obvious reasons. So radical thinking is required. You approve very much of the scheme. Let me ask you this on a detail. I like the idea as well, by the way. But what do we do, or what will they do with the 2 million Palestinians who won't be able to live there anymore? Where will they put them?
It's worth remembering that Palestinian identity, especially political Palestinian identity, is not based on the idea of making a Palestinian state that lives alongside a Jewish Israeli state. It's based predominantly in mainstream Palestinian discourse on what they call resisting or eradicating the Jewish state. And that's why I think this is a disruption of a long-entrenched, failed orthodoxy, and it really is the unveiling of a vision that dares to reimagine the Middle East in starkly different terms. But as you say, the prospect of moving 1.5 million to 2 million people from the Gaza Strip is certainly not to be taken lightly. So the question is, would it be a forced transfer? Would it be a voluntary transfer? All these sorts of details were not mentioned by Donald Trump, possibly because this is never going to happen, or possibly because it's not about the details and he does intend to make it happen, but it will be done voluntarily. There are many possibilities there. I mean, for example, Trump said that it's virtually impossible for those people to move back to their homes. So when we saw the
they're not there anymore, are they?
Exactly. I mean, many of them returned north during the hostage deal period that we've been witnessing for the last couple of weeks, given that permission to do so, only to find they didn't have homes or infrastructure there, and they went south again. So if that's the case, it would be quite reasonable for third-party countries to open their doors, as happens with refugee populations around the world in war-torn areas. I mean, many people here took in Ukrainians when Russia invaded Ukraine in their homes. So the idea that the Arab world has actually closed its doors and closed the border, for example, with Egypt, all the way through this war, rather than welcoming in Arab Palestinians in order to escape from danger, is preposterous. Not preposterous that now they might do so in order to help give those people a better life should they choose to leave themselves. So I think that is one fundamental part of the discussion. But just to say, the other part of this is that Trump is a politician, a leader, a president who specialises in political theatrics and, let's say, organised chaos. So his suggestion here was something which is really a catalyst for further discussion of what might happen. It may be just a technique to pressure Egypt and Jordan into accepting his proposition that they should take some of these Palestinians from Gaza in, but not necessarily to be taken literally that he's going to occupy, that America is going to occupy the Gaza Strip. That said, with Donald Trump, you never know, and certainly I think we have to keep an open mind. Sometimes in the Middle East, you need to believe what people actually tell you.
Well, you know what they say about Donald Trump, you should take him seriously, but not literally. And I did think that Netanyahu, but they've had their differences in the past, but they were genuinely, obviously friendly last night. Netanyahu said there has never been a man in the White House who's been a president that's been more friendly to Israel than Donald Trump. So there's no doubt about their genuine closeness politically. And Netanyahu's quite likes this plan, but I did see him bristle slightly when Donald Trump said, well, you know, America might have to invade, might take over Gaza, take over the running of the Gaza Strip. Well, I think that's sort of probably pushing it a bit, isn't it?
Well, for decades, world leaders have clung to really exhausted formulas like the two-state fantasy. I think it's been clear to many people for years that that wasn't a realistic proposition because, as I said, one side has repeatedly turned down having their own state. That's the Palestinians. So given that that's the case, I think what Trump was hoping to do here was completely reset the terms, a sort of reset against this Palestinian fundamental rejectionism and to face the realities. Let's not forget that in his last term in office, Donald Trump made this so-called deal of the century in which he offered the Palestinians another alternative solution, which they also rejected, like every other single offer they've been made throughout their history for statehood or independence. So this time, it's no surprise if he's coming back with a deal that is somewhat worse in terms, because that's how negotiation works, and Donald Trump is a negotiator.
Absolutely. Well, let's remind us about some of this political theatre last night in the White House. Take a look. Why at this big launch event was With Love... I don't know what that was. That was me. What was I doing there? What on earth was that? Have we got the right clip, please? Okay. All right, okay, we'll go back to Jonathan. Can we get that clip ready, please? Jonathan, sorry about that. I was going to say, in terms of the two-state solution that people like Keir Starmer and the Western nations are fond of embracing, where is the two-state solution in the Palestinians' favourite slogan, from the river to the sea? That's a one-state solution involving the annihilation and extermination of Israel, isn't it?
Well, indeed it is. And the concept of a two-state proposition is also one that's been really unrealistic for years, if not decades, never mind since October the 7th. And that's because, on the one hand, as you say, the regular slogan of from the river to the sea means the eradication of the State of Israel. But more importantly as well, the UN has been fundamental in perpetuating the conflict by constantly extending the so-called Palestinian refugee problem. So every Palestinian in Gaza or in Judea and Samaria or the West Bank is considered a refugee. Palestinians living in other countries, Britain, America, they're also refugees. Unlike any other refugee population, the UN body that looks after Palestinians specifically says that they can inherit refugee status even if they're citizens of another country. So this is a problem that also needs to be dealt with, and perhaps less flashy flashy, less headline-making today were some of the other things that Donald Trump announced yesterday as well, which is that the US is withdrawing funding from the UN.
I was going to say that. So it's UNRWA, isn't it? And he's also withdrawing from the UN Human Rights Council, and
Israel has followed suit on that one as well.
But you must, as a supporter of Israel, Jewish journalist, you must have. I personally was thrilled by that, because I'll tell you what infuriates me about that half-wit Antonio Guterres, who runs the United Nations. Before even October the 7th, regularly the UN would pass, about sort of 7 or 8 condemnations of Israel every week. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that the United Nations has acted like an anti-Semitic organisation in terms of Israel. And Donald Trump stood up for that, stood against that. So I applaud these moves by him, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, the fact is that many people who don't follow these things closely assume the UN is some sort of supranational whiter-than-white body that only works for the greater good. But in reality, if you just think about it logically, it's got so many corrupt, non-democratic and even Arab countries making it up that, of course, it ended up with this anti-Semitic, anti-Israel bias. And the UN Human Rights Council is just one such example. For example, it has a set agenda item dedicated only to Israel. That's the only country in the world that it does that for. So even if you have a low opinion of Israel and its human rights record, which is it's wrong if you do, but even if you do, it's preposterous that Israel has this special obsession and this special focus in the council when no other country does. Not China, not Syria under Assad, none of these places, only Israel. So Trump has withdrawn funding and also the US representative there, and Israel has followed suit. And this does an awful lot to kind of rip out that sense of respectability. The fact that the Secretary General has dug in this evening making a speech about the inalienable rights of the Palestinians, etc., and recommitting to this two-state fantasy only shows that the UN, even when being dragged by the nose by the US, is just completely adamant that we shouldn't find a real solution. And why is that important? Not just for Israel, but also for the Palestinians. If people really care about the Palestinians, the idea of the UN keeping them in perpetual refugee status, constantly punishing them so that their corrupt leaders can just clean up, vacuum up more money, and that the UN itself and all these other agencies can just keep going, all these endless salaries, absolutely ridiculous. It shows that they've got no commitment to trying to improve the lives of Palestinians.
They haven't. Right, we've got that clip ready at last. I hope it won't be me this time. Let's have a quick look.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute, I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad, this could be so magnificent.
See, the thing is, Jonathan, a lot of people review how ridiculous. Well, it wasn't. It's about time somebody created a new narrative. And I think that's why Benjamin Netanyahu is right behind the president here. I think, as we've discussed, some of the facets of his master plan, are going to be tough to achieve, to say the least. But if we can change the narrative, change the discussions, change the playing field around which the Middle East ongoing debate revolves, then that's going to be a good thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the concept that you might in some way try to allow people from Gaza, who we've been hearing for the entire duration of this war are suffering greatly because of the war, the idea that you would stop them or be against an idea that allowed them to settle somewhere of their own will and have a better life, free from the constraints of the tyranny of Hamas and other corrupt Palestinian leadership. The idea that you would get in the way of that, again, shows a lack of interest in the lives of those people. But above all else, whether or not we take Trump totally seriously and totally at face value for this plan, his vision is likely to terrify those who've grown comfortable with the status quo, because it's going to unsettle all those people who prefer this diplomatic inertia to the hard truths. This is the population in Gaza which burst across the border into Israel on the 7th of October and carried out the most horrific, barbaric assault and slaughter of Jewish people since the Holocaust. So it's peculiar that there is such an excessive amount of hand-wringing about those people, as opposed to what they did and continued to do and have continued to say they would do again and again if they were given the opportunity. So this is going to enrage people who've built their careers and reputations and fortunes, financial fortunes, on the perpetuation of this constantly unsolvable problem. Donald Trump should be commended for coming up with new ideas which are based on reality. If Barack Obama was given a Nobel Peace Prize less than 8 months into his presidency for, well, nothing, then maybe it's time that Donald Trump should be considered for it, for having done so much more in his first term and in his first 3 weeks of this term. He has done so much more to help with this rebalancing of the Middle East that he and Benjamin Netanyahu and their advisors have carefully worked at. The Middle East is an entirely different scenario than it used to be, and that is in large part because of the bold and brave and heroic acts of Israel. And now there is a US president who seems to be squarely behind Israel in protecting itself from this genocidal existential threat that it's faced on 7 fronts, including from Gaza.
It's good to see, and I really like the idea of Donald Trump getting the Nobel Peace Prize. And if even a part of this plan comes into fruition, and we are ridded of the constant spectacle of permanent, eternal conflict, murderous conflict, then both these guys deserve the Nobel Peace Prize, both Netanyahu and Trump.
Remember, arch-terrorist Yasser Arafat got a Nobel Peace Prize. So the idea again that people would balk at Donald Trump winning the Nobel Peace Prize just shows that they're not serious about these things. Their hatred of Trump and their hatred of his methods of carrying out negotiations and engaging on the world stage absolutely stands above and beyond any actual evaluation of the suggestions he's making or the actions he's putting in place in order to try to improve the situation in the Middle East. But Donald Trump is immune to that kind of mockery as well, and that is why he is the kind of person that can do this. I said in that column in The Spectator that this Trump plan, whether taken seriously or not, is the emperor's new clothes of geopolitics, because once he said it, everybody can see the nakedness of the situation. Everybody can see how nakedly ridiculous it's been to constantly do the same thing again and again and pretend that the Palestinians had different intentions from the ones they clearly demonstrated on October the 7th and have done throughout their history of rejectionism and violence and terrorism aimed at Jews and Israel. Donald Trump has called that out. He's called time on that. And I think it's about time the West got in line with what he's saying, the rest of the West.
Yeah, I mean, it is ridiculous the way that all of the Western democracy, or all of the Guardian readers of this world, both of them, just constantly say, well, it's a two-state solution. It's got to be the two-state solution. The Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution, all for them. So they ought to get that through their thick heads. Jonathan, really great article, by the way. Enjoyed reading it, and thank you very much for coming on. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Jonathan Sacerdoti there, journalist who's written about Donald Trump's Riviera of the Middle East plan. It was extraordinary, but he's right, isn't he? It's time for something different. Yeah, it won't all come about, but if some of it comes about, maybe, just maybe, there may be peace in our times in Gaza at long last. 03444991000. We're going to break now and take a couple of your calls.
Those who were polled want the police to be tough on murder, no surprise there, serious crime, sexual assaults, rape, that kind of thing. They're with us, they're with you, they're with me, they're with every other right-minded thinking person. Can the police do some proper policing? Now, some of those crimes the police do rather well. Murders, albeit the unsolved murder rate is creeping up. Let me make you aware of that. But they don't want online insults.
Welcome back. Got a quick text. We're going to go to the calls in just a second. Got a quick text from Keith. Oh, it's a WhatsApp message actually saying 5.5 million people were denied their voting rights today. They should defer council tax payments until they have God-given rights to vote in any local election. So basically it was announced as expected that the Labour government, terrified of getting thrashed by Reform UK in the local elections on May the 1st, have indeed, there was due to be 29, they've called off 9 of them. These are the boroughs, the areas where they expected Reform UK to beat them. So what they've done is cancel democracy so they don't look as unpopular as they actually are. What do you think about that? Let me know. 03444991000. Denying you your right to vote so they can pretend they're wildly popular when everybody loves Reform UK a lot more than them. Let's go to the phones, and this is a new caller, always like a new caller. Welcome to the show, to Mark from Warwickshire. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for taking the call.
Pleasure.
I've got a bit of an itch that I can't scratch over this speech therapy session.
Yeah.
I mean, initially, I thought it was sort of not material, the fact that there was not going to be any investigation, because all that we would be deprived of is the knowledge that the Prime Minister had been prosecuted and would be penalised somehow. So we've been deprived of that. But in any case, he has been prosecuted in the court of public opinion.
Yeah, that's right. He has, Mark. He has, Mark. And I'll tell you what, Mark, also, he's been prosecuted and found guilty. Because there's no, I don't know what your take on it is, but there's no doubt in my mind, this woman, Leonie Mellinger, some two-bit actress, got on the train in, this was Christmas Eve 2020, in the height of the London lockdowns. She got on the train in Brighton, travelled up to London, went to Labour HQ wearing a mask and gave him a face-to-face vocal coaching session ahead of some speech he was going to make about Boris Johnson's Leave deal. Now, a lawyer stood up today, a lawyer who, funnily enough, it's an extraordinary coincidence, works for the chambers that he founded, that Keir Starmer founded, and said, arguably, this was legal. Arguably, this was legal. So, by extension, arguably, it was illegal. And I think it's more than arguable. He broke the law. He broke COVID rules. He broke the law. This is the guy who was so sanctimonious about Boris and the Tories and their parties in number 10 Downing Street, Partygate. And all along, he's breaking the law himself. What a hypocrite. What a liar.
Yeah, indeed. But the speech then that he was being coached for, was he due to give that speech later that day?
No, I don't believe so. I believe it was because it was the day before Christmas. I think it was soon after Christmas he was going to do that.
Right. So this is the implausibility of all of this. In fact, it's utterly inconceivable. I mean, I'm just not buying it. The other thing, I wouldn't be buying an elocution lesson on Christmas Eve. I might be buying something else. but it wouldn't be an elocution lesson. So it's inconceivable.
No, he's telling a pack of lies. He's telling a pack of lies. And at first, the Labour spin machine, when this story first emerged, it is, of course, in this new book by a couple of journalists called Get In. It's the story of Starmer's rise to power in the Labour ranks. This story was contained in that book. At first, Labour responded by saying, no, there was no law breaking here because Leonie Mellinger, in her role as the Labour leader's vocal coach, was a key worker. For example, you might be surprised to hear I came to work during the COVID crisis here in Talk Towers. I was a key worker. Broadcasters were key workers. So a lot of unlikely people were key workers. Vocal coaches, I don't think so. But of course, yesterday they had to concede, well, no, she wasn't a key worker. Of course she wasn't. Yeah. So I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever. She didn't need to be doing that. It wasn't essential. It wasn't necessary. By the way, she did give then and still does give vocal coaching sessions by Zoom and FaceTime. So she didn't have to be there. Keir Starmer broke the COVID laws.
Yeah, but the real point I wanted to make is that it's not that I don't feel aggrieved that we've been deprived of seeing the Prime Minister prosecuted and penalised. Mm-hmm. In the way that Boris was, but what we've been deprived of is the full story. So by denying the investigation, they've just actually inflamed the situation. They would have been much better off just investigating it and putting it to bed. But in fact, no, they've created this fertile ground now because everybody's thinking there's much more to this than meets the eye. I
think you're exactly right. It's that old adage, isn't it? Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. I mean, that should be the slogan for Keir Starmer's life, because that's all he ever does. He just lies about stuff and then sort of tries to excuse his way out of it. Like the fact he lied about Axel Rudakabana up in Southport and pretended there was no link to terrorism. And anyone who suggested as much, he called us far-right thugs. He's a liar. He's a sort of inveterate liar. And that's not really good enough for a Prime Minister, is it? Mark, listen, I've got to move on, but what an excellent call. Call me again. Let's talk some more. That was Mark in Warwickshire making, I think, some very good points about Keir Starmer. Get on the phone. We're going to come back to the calls in 3/4 of an hour or so, but very interested to hear what you feel about this voice coaching session on December the 24th, Christmas Eve 2020. I say unequivocally the Prime Minister, or the then Labour leader, the future Prime Minister, broke the COVID laws, broke the rules. Another indication, another example of those Westminster elitists who thought that all those stupid, ludicrous regulations that they slapped on us. You've got to stand 4 yards from a friend. You can have 6 people on that table and 4 people on that. You can only have 2 people around, but you can't have one. It was just pathetic, ridiculous. All those people who imposed on us those stupid, ludicrous, ineffective rules and regulations, they didn't think it applied to them. Boris Johnson didn't think it applied to him. Keir Starmer didn't think it applied to him. They're all the same. There's the Westminster bubble gang, the elites, and there's the little people like us. Sod them, I say. What do you think? Let me know. 03444991000. When I say sod them, I could think of other words to say. I'm getting sick of this lot, aren't you? Right, we're going to go to break next. Next up, Ben Habib for the next half an hour until 9 o'clock. Lots to discuss. Should you be allowed to burn the Quaran in this country? Should that be against the law? I don't think so. Why would it be against the law? 03444991000. That's the first thing I will discuss with Mr. Habib. That next, stay tuned. Welcome back. Well, a warm welcome to the show to Chairman of the Great British PAC, former Deputy Leader of Reform UK and all-round first-class scholar and gentleman, Ben Habib. Welcome, Ben.
Good evening, Kevin. Good to see you. That's a very kind introduction. Thank you very much.
Very well deserved as well. First of all, I want to discuss something that alarmed me with you. On Saturday, a protester, a guy called Martin Frost, in Manchester, tore out pages of the Islamic holy book, the Quran, and set fire to them. The Manchester police descended on him like a ton of bricks, and he's been convicted of a racially aggravated public order offence. Now, I would suggest that that is code for Sharia law. The Manchester police effectively have arrested this person and he's been convicted under Sharia law. Insofar as under Sharia law, of course you can't burn the Quran. But under British law, I beg to inform the Manchester police, you can. Just as you can, if you so wish, burn the Bible or the Jewish Torah or whatever you want. You know, religious tracts are not protected by law. We got rid of our blasphemy laws in 2008, and about time too. They were ludicrous, anachronistic, outdated and medieval. And this, to me, this nonsense in Manchester looks like a return, at the very least, of our outdated, now cancelled blasphemy laws, and at worst, an imposition of Sharia law.
I mean, you're absolutely right to be outraged by it. And even though we abolished our blasphemy laws in 2008, we hadn't enforced them for 100-odd years or more. And it's remarkable that in 2025, as offensive as anyone might think it is to burn a book, any book, it's remarkable that you would be arrested for it. I mean, I almost went out on the street today. My office is just off Piccadilly. I nearly went out on the street today with a Bible, and I was going to burn the Bible in public and see if I got arrested. And I thought better of it because I just couldn't bring myself to burn a Bible. But someone ought to do it just to test whether there's equality under the law. You know, one of the subtitles I saw when you were having that brilliant chat with the caller before I came on was two-tier care. Well, if you arrest someone for burning the Quran, you should equally arrest them for burning the Bible. Not that I advocate either, but I bet you if I went on the streets of London tomorrow and burnt the Bible, I bet there would be no consequence whatsoever. It's a bit like, you remember the guy in Batley, the teacher in Batley 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, who showed caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad and has been in hiding ever since for fear of his life. You compare that to what happened 3 years ago at Trinity College, Cambridge, where the Dean of Trinity College, so the head of the chapel in Trinity College, likened Jesus Christ to a transgender individual, and the flesh wound that he had from a Roman spear in his chest on the cross, he likened that to a vagina. And there was absolutely no uproar. Can you imagine if they'd said the same thing about the Prophet Muhammad? It would have been an absolute hullabaloo in the country. And I think where we've gone completely wrong, and this is liberalism gone mad, is that we have forgotten our own roots, our own culture. We've taken in other cultures and we've said, we're going to protect you to the nth degree. We're going to put a protective blanket around you. You can practice your culture. You can have your own identity. We're going to promote and celebrate your position. We're going to arrest anyone in our own country who disagrees with you. This is, it's quite peculiar because, as I say, this is liberalism gone mad in the pursuit of promoting these individuals' rights to have these beliefs and systems. We are actually prepared to shut down free speech and arrest other people. Liberalism has become dictatorial. And that's where we've got to. The arrest of someone who burnt the Quran is a dictatorship. It's the shutting down of free speech. Islam is not an ethnic group.
Yeah.
Islam
when they
is a
say
religious...
this, Ben, when they say this, Ben, this is what this guy Frost shouted. So he ripped pages out, set fire to them. He's a protester, you know, as I say, as you imply. I mean, I wouldn't advise this. You know, don't go around burning religious tracts. It's not very nice. People will be offended, but to offend people isn't against the law, and it is not against the law in Britain.
Absolutely.
It's a matter of freedom of expression and speech, that if you want to burn the Bible or the Quran, you should be allowed to. He shouted, this is what I think of your Quran. Islam has no place in civil society. Now, he was prosecuted for a racially aggravated offence. What's racial about that?
There's nothing racial. It's nothing. They're appropriating the term racist in order to find fault so that they can arrest him. And by the way, as abhorrent as being racist is it really an arrestable offence just to be racist? You have to incite violence. You have to incite some kind of damage. Racism is abhorrent, but again, it's not an arrestable offence. The country has gone mad, and this concept of the word Islamophobia, which means the irrational fear of Islam, is a very calculated term because it suggests that any fear of Islam is irrational. It's designed, the term itself is designed to shut down debate. Mm-hmm. And our civilization, the British civilization, the reason we were one of the most successful countries in the world for hundreds of years was because we did have free debate. We had diversity of thought. We challenged each other. And actually, Kevin, when we went abroad, we butted up against other cultures. We argued with those other cultures. Sometimes we brought their values back to our country and we used those values as part of our culture and we evolved. But you do not evolve. You cannot be a settled people. You cannot be a better, more enlightened people by shutting down debate and saying we're not prepared to tolerate any form of dissent. And that's what's happening in the UK. In the pursuit of so-called racial harmony, they are shutting down debate. If you want to be a Muslim, that's absolutely fine, but the state is going to put a protective blanket around you. It's going to protect you from criticism. It's going to promote your right to be a Muslim. It'll give you the right, incidentally, as it happens, to have your own schools, to have your own courts, to practice your own Sharia law in this country. All of this is fundamentally wrong. Yeah. And Muslims, I say this as the son of, albeit a lapsed Muslim, my father's Punjabi and a Muslim, I say this to all Muslims who are listening. Have the courage to have the debate. Don't hide behind sanctimony. Don't hide behind the sanctity, the so-called sanctity of an ideology or religion.
Absolutely.
Christians have the debate, don't they, Kevin?
They do.
We have the debate. So what's the problem?
Just before we move on, a couple of worrying elements here. Of course, we all remember that dark day when the Labour MP Tahir Ali, only in November, stood up in the Parliament and called for a return of the blasphemy laws, basically, and the Keir Starmer condemned any attacks on religious tracts, including the Bible and the Quran. Well, I don't think he should have done that, but we know what the Prime Minister was doing there. Now, in this ludicrous hearing in Magistrates Court in Manchester Magistrates Court, there was a victim impact statement, you'll be amazed to hear. This presumably is someone who reported this or something. This impact statement was from a person not named. It said this: I was quite shocked, disgusted and offended. I'm a Muslim. I still can't believe someone would do this. When he began to burn the Quran, my heart was about to break. This is the most emotion I have ever felt. Well, I've got some sympathy for him. He is obviously a devout Muslim and he was appalled by what he saw. But, you know, giving succor to this kind of emotional statement is not, it's just wrong. You know, I'm sorry you were disgusted and offended. I'm sorry that you still can't believe someone would do this. And I'm really sorry that you thought your heart was about to break out. And I'm very, very sorry that this is the most emotion that you have ever felt. But frankly, so bloody what?
Absolutely.
What's that got to do with a legal proceeding here in this country?
I couldn't agree more. And, you know, my heart broke when people described me as a swivel-eyed lunatic because I believed in leaving the European Union. It broke my heart. And I was very offended.
It didn't, Ben. Hey, listen, Ben, we've got to go to break. Some more stuff to discuss after these messages. Stay where you are.
I think it's a horrible thing he did. Nothing can excuse him. I don't know what the cause is.
Right.
Nobody
well,
knows
let's not
what the
try and
cause
blame
is
it
of
on the fact that he didn't get enough help in the youth club. You know, he's a complete maniac. He's threatened and killed people and basically ended an awful lot of families' lives for them. You know, let's not get political about it.
I think he's done a horrible thing. That is all I can say.
Yeah, I think that's probably all you should say. Oscar, thank you very much indeed. Let's never talk to Oscar Brandt again. Journalist in Gothenburg. A complete plank, I'm afraid.
Welcome back. I'm still talking to the chairman of the Great British PAC, Ben Habib. Ben, I want to get your take on a couple of stories. Well, first, this is a fairly new development, but it's our old favourite hated topic, the migrant crisis. They're coming across again. Quietly, this has been unnoticed, not in some of the massive numbers we've seen before, but this will be the beginning of the avalanche that will happen in the next few months because the weather is already getting a little bit better. So on Saturday, 47 came across, Sunday 147 and 52 on Monday. They had a day off yesterday, so they're coming again. And you probably saw the stories yesterday the reason they're coming is because the enticements, the encouragements that this country, this ludicrous country, gives to these illegal foreigners who want to break our laws by crossing the channel in illegal vessels and busting into our country without the proper documents, usually without their passports. The enticements and the encouragements now are getting they're becoming a parody of themselves. So you saw the story yesterday, £141 million by local councils, given by local councillors on freebies for illegal.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, you saw that, PlayStations,
laptops and
yoga
whatnot,
sessions, guided tours around Anfield Stadium, DJ lessons, personal favourite of mine. Absolutely mad. And we've just learnt today 4 Labour councillors are taking taxpayers' money and paying them on teaching sessions for illegal migrants on how to report hate crimes. We're never going to stop these people coming here. Whilst we're basically saying, come over here and we've got lots of free stuff for you. You're going to love it. What's going on?
The politicians say that they're going to stop the people smugglers, that this is all abhorrent, crossing the channel is deeply dangerous, these people shouldn't be breaking the law to get into our country. And then you see all these policies that would do nothing to deter, would just encourage. The French, by the way, spend about £5,000 per annum per illegal migrant. We spend well over £50,000 per head per annum. So you just do the maths. If you're an illegal migrant and you've got half a brain cell, you'll cross the channel because you're going to come to Blighty, where you get greeted in the middle of the channel with a lovely warm blanket, a cup of tea, a Kit Kat, and then you're whisked over and put into a four-star hotel.
Then you get free food for life, free doctors, free dentists, free lawyers to fight your case to stay here. This is basket case politics, isn't it? Absolute basket case.
I mean, I don't know if you remember, Kevin, but even Border Forces Union was funding a case in favour of illegal migrants. I don't know if you remember that from a couple of years ago. But J.D. Vance, I think, was in front, the Vice President of the United States of America was in front of a congressional hearing the other day. And he was asked, how many of these people who enter the country illegally are criminals? And he said, well, all of them, because they've broken into the country.
Yeah, exactly right. That's what we need to say about ours. They go, oh, well, once they claim asylum, they're no longer illegal. Well, I say they are. They broke our laws. They came across the channel in illegal vessels. They broke into our country. They're criminals. We should treat them as such. And by the way, so I said earlier, 47 came across on Sunday. Don't ask me to do the intricate maths. Let's forget about 7 of them. For the sake of argument, let's just say 50 came over. So when you get a
2.5 million. Yeah.
So you get a boat full of 20, only 20. That's £1 million.
I know.
So 20.
I know.
So we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of them coming over every month. Every 20 of them costs this country £1 million a year.
Yeah.
I've got to move on though, Ben, and I want to ask you your thoughts on Keir Starmer. Of course, today, or 4-tier Keir, as we're now calling him, because he broke the COVID rules, he broke the regulations by inviting his voice coach in a mask to come into the strict 4-tier restrictions, COVID restrictions on Christmas Eve 2020. He broke the rules, there's no doubt about it. But of course, there's a statute of limitations on COVID offences, which I quite approve.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Is that right?
3 years. 3 years. I quite approve of.
Oh my goodness.
So
okay, I know, but what a tragedy for the nation that there's a statute of limitations on it.
Yeah, so he's not going to be in court. I don't think he ever would have been. He won't face an investigation. The police said, well, we can't investigate because it's out of time. But he broke the COVID laws, and this is the man who was so sanctimonious about Boris and his cake and his champagne during the same times.
I think it's outrageous that a technicality like statute of limitations could prevent this man having to resign. He was so sanctimonious about the whole thing with Boris. He stood up and he said, if I was ever found guilty of having broken COVID laws and I were Prime Minister, I would resign. And he should resign because he's been found out. That's absolutely wretched. And, you know, the idea, I heard again, the great conversation you had with the caller before I came on, who was, you know, querying the motives of this woman coming across. You were saying, I think you could do voice education or whatever it's called.
She does though. She does
Zoom,
it.
right?
She advertises. I can do it on Zoom if you prefer.
Yeah. Yeah. So, look, there's something else going on here, isn't there? Christmas Eve, an absolutely necessary voice coaching session on Christmas Eve. I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I think Mrs. Starmer needs to have a word with a voice coach.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether or not her name is Leonie Mellinger, whether or not she's some kind of friend of the Starmers or something.
Yeah.
Because it's a very curious thing to do under the circumstances.
Very odd.
She came on a first-class ticket from Brighton to London, made her way across the deserted streets of our capital city to Labour headquarters. There she is. Whereupon she taught the Prime Minister how to speak properly. Apart from anything else, of course, Ben, he should get his money back, shouldn't he? Because
he can't speak.
Yeah, exactly right. Yes, he's still not exactly the orator of the decade, is he? No, exactly. So I mean, this was... So he was just another one of the Westminster elites who thought all of those ridiculous COVID laws, you know, you can sit 3 at a table but not 5.
Yeah.
You've got to be 4 yards away from your friends. And
so what this tells us, can I just say, Kevin, what this tells us is the virus was never dangerous.
I know.
That those who knew about it and were leading us knew it wasn't dangerous because they were abusing it left, right and centre. And the COVID inquiry, which is going to cost this country 350 million quid.
It costs £300,000 a day.
£300,000 a day. They haven't once come to that conclusion. This country has got £500 billion more in debt. It had an inflation crisis, which fueled a cost of living crisis, and a banking withdrawal from all our private businesses and so on, a massive increase in taxation, all of that, and the broken NHS, let's not forget that, all of that on the back of a virus that they knew clearly at the time wasn't doing any damage. Because if they believed it was like Ebola, they would never have done the things that they did.
With respect to those who lost loved ones from COVID, but yes, it was an incredibly overrated virus, and Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson, they knew it. The rules were for the little people, for us, but not for them. Keir Starmer broke the COVID laws, and I want my audience to give me a ring and tell me what they think about that. Ben, fantastic to talk to you as always. Very soon we will talk again. Ben Habib there. Chagos next. Welcome back. In 20 minutes or so, the floor is all yours. It's 40 minutes of your calls. I'll read some of your messages. I don't know if we've got any WhatsApp voice notes yet, but we usually have. I'll play those out. So it's your show as of about 20 past. You know what we're talking about. Well, I was just talking to Ben Habib about Keir Starmer. Well, he broke the COVID rules, didn't he? Obviously. He can say what he likes. Well, the rules were followed. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. You didn't need to see your voice coach in the middle of the restrictions when those of us were about to celebrate Christmas, unable to see our loved ones, weren't allowed out of our houses, couldn't go to work, had to stand like 20 yards from the nearest human being, all of that claptrap. And you get your voice coach to get on a train from Brighton, go through the deserted streets of London and come to Labour HQ to give you an essential emergency voice coaching session. Really? Really? Apparently she was wearing a mask. So, wow, that's within the rules, right? He broke the rules. You know, the rules were ridiculous. But if the rest of us had to obey them, he should have done. And, you know, Ben was saying that the virus, you know, was overrated by the political elite. It was, but we only say that with all due respect and sorrow for those who lost loved ones. I mean, to say, you know, it wasn't much of a virus is an insult to the people who lost their loved ones and people who died because of it. But in the great scheme of things, medically, it was very overrated. It wasn't as lethal, nearly as lethal as the politicians tried to make out. And we should never have done any of those lockdowns. We should never have been so ridiculous in the restrictions we imposed upon ourselves or that the government imposed on us. We should never have done it, and it's wrecked the country, continues to wreck the country. Socially, economically, you name it. Educationally, it was the most disastrous period in the history of modern politics in this country and around the world, come to think of it. Let me know what you think. 03444991000. Also, so did Keir Starmer break the rules? The migrant crisis, let me know what you think about that. And Valdo Colaconi, should he be retried? Why did he get away with manslaughter on diminished responsibility? He knifed 3 innocent people to death. He should be in a prison, not a hospital. 03444991000. Justice for the families, I say. And anything else you want to talk about. So give me a call. Before we get to any of this, statements or Kemi Badenoch was typically not very good in Prime Minister's question time today, but she did have one kind of moment. She certainly tackled the Prime Minister on the right topic, and that is his continued bizarre, almost inexplicable determination to give away the Chagos Islands, the very strategic South Sea Chagos Islands, from which America and Britain keep an eye on the Middle East, keep an eye on China, the Far East. There's an airstrip there on one of the small islands called Diego Garcia. And Keir wants to diminish British power and influence by giving the Chagos Islands not back to Mauritius, because they never had them before, but to Mauritius. And he said, well, geographically, they're very, you know, it's only right they go back to Mauritius. Wait a second, they don't go back to Mauritius. And geographically, Mauritius is 1,300 miles from the Chagos Islands. When we started going, do you want them back? Do you want them? Do you want them? They go, well, not really. Oh, what about if we give you £18 billion? Would you have it back then? Oh, we might think about that. And bear in mind, by the way, that the Chagos Islands are rather to give them to Mauritius would be to give them to China's best friend. Mauritius loves China and China loves Mauritius. So it's inexplicable why he wants to do this. America's not keen, to say the least, and yet he presses on. Well, first of all, let's welcome to the show. He's the director of the Henry Jackson Society, Henry Mendoza. Hello, Henry.
No, Alan, Kevin, Alan.
So why no, Alan, the Alan Jackson Society. I'm getting my words mixed up.
He's a country singer, Alan Jackson.
Yeah,
no,
is
it's the Henry
he?
Jackson Society. Very good, though, yes.
I'm starting off on a spoonerism, sorry. Good to have you on board, Alan. Let's remind ourselves of Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch in Parliament today. Okay, well, we'll go to that in a minute. Anyway, basically, Kemi Badenoch challenged Keir Starmer on his bizarre determination to give away the Chagos Islands. He did make a fairly good point. He said, well, you lot started it. The Tories actually started these negotiations. But my question to you, Alan, is, why? It's mystifying. Why is he so determined to give these islands to a country that's never had sovereign control of them, that was never particularly interested in having them, but has got quite interested ever since we've offered them the added bonus of 18 billion quid? What's going on? What's your thoughts?
Well, there's many views as to why he might be wanting to do this. The charitable view, which is still crazy, is that he wants to preempt a possible case in the International Court of Justice where Britain would be found guilty of holding onto these islands because of the treaty that actually granted Mauritius its independence, and the Chagos Islands were in a different administrative part. And there was a whole complicated set of things back in the late 1960s where at some point there was going to be a discussion about who the islands should go to, because Britain was only going to hold them for a certain period of time. And the view is that he is going to preempt this by giving them up before a rule against into the International Court of Justice, because he is Mr. Rules, don't forget, Kev. And as a result, he's going to be so Mr. Rules, he's going to be Mr. Rules before the rules have even been made, and he's going to kind of give up the islands, before we're ruled against. Now, the problem with this approach is that we have no idea what the ICJ will actually rule, and if he was committed to keeping them, he could no doubt make a very good legal defence about why we ought to be keeping them. And while it is correct that the Tories began this discussion phase, we have no clue what the Tories would have ended up with in terms of what area, and I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have been this, even if they'd have been foolish enough to try and give them away. Now, my view on this is that actually, for all of him wanting to be on the right side of the ICJ, part of this is it's an awkward remnant of empire. He doesn't like the empire, in common with much of his political party. We need to clear our, history of this sort of anomaly of things like the Chagos Islands, and we just need to dump them on anyone who'll take them. And if we have to pay them to do it, then we'll do that as well. But you're quite right to point out that Mauritius didn't originally own them, and the one set of people who have not been talked about at all in this are the Chagos Islanders themselves, who are a separate sort of people, as it were, and have been essentially passed over in a classic Whitehall colonial-style deal where one colonial power is apparently handing them over to another colonial power, and they've got no say in it. So the whole thing is just bizarre, full stop. The reality is we shouldn't be giving them back, Kevin, because they are of strategic interest to Britain. They are a key national security component of our ability to project power and intelligence in the Indo-Pacific. China is going to be the likely beneficiary. Why on earth are we going to do this? It's just insanity. And at a time when Donald Trump is out there really showing what American power is like, at the moment it looks like what Keir Starmer's doing is showing what British weakness is like. And it's just an absolutely unenforced error, no purpose in it. And what are we doing? What are we doing?
Exactly right. It's just mystifying. Or better late than never. Here is Kemi challenging Keir Starmer on this very issue in Parliament today.
When Labour negotiates, our country loses. Yesterday, we heard the government offered £18 billion for Mauritius to take our territory in the Chagos Islands. This is money that belongs to our children and their children. This is an immoral surrender, so North London lawyers can boast at their dinner parties.
The last government conducted 11 of the 13 rounds of those negotiations, and Mr. Speaker, they were right to do so. That is why this government has completed that process. When she became leader of the opposition, I said to her that I would give her a briefing on any national security issue if she asked for it. That's very important to the way that we run our democracy. She has not asked for a briefing on the Chagos Islands. And that's because she's more interested in chasing reform than in national security.
Alan, I'll tell you what worried me about that is what he's suggesting there is he said, oh, well, actually the Tories were right to start this process. And only you'd come to see me, Kemi, in one of our private secret briefings, I would have explained things to you. So what he's suggesting there is there's an element to this that we, the useless, pointless public, don't know about, that he's harbouring some kind of secret that actually makes the giving away of the Chagos Islands necessary, that actually would explain why he's doing this. Now, if this is the case, if he's keeping a secret about why we're doing this and not telling the public, I mean, that's an affront to democracy and a disgrace.
Well, I would take it slightly differently. I don't think there is a secret.
Yeah, I know. And I get
don't
that.
think there is one. There isn't. What he was basically saying in that response was something much more basic, which is, I offered you the chance to come and chat with me about it, and we'd have the National Security Advisor in with us, and we'd just talk about why it's in Britain's national security interest to give it up and not. And his argument would be, number one, we can't possibly ever fall foul of the international, Court of Justice. That would be terrible for Britain if we did that. What a disaster for this country if judges from, tin pot countries tell us what to do. I mean, disaster on that basis. Number two, he will be saying, and I've negotiated this lease on the, on the military base for decades. And as a result, we're not going to be losing any national security problems. We will have done the right thing internationally and through justice, and we'll keep the security. And that's what basically that briefing would have said. Now, the problem with that is that although he has negotiated seemingly this lease, number one, the lease eventually will run out. But number two, even while the lease is in operation, by giving the rest of the islands back to Mauritius, the Chinese will move in right next door to the base and they'll be spying on it the whole time. So the value of it is much diminished because you're going to have Chinese surveillance equipment all around it. So it's, on a national security basis, almost any expert will tell you that this is, well, your sort of sleight of hand to suggest there's no national security implications. Yeah, we can keep the base for a bit. That's fine. But, what does that actually mean in practical terms? It means that China moves in next door and listens in. And that is a problem for our national security.
And the Chagosians, the islanders themselves, they were kicked off in the 1960s when both Britain and America basically decided this is very strategic. You're going to have to go and live elsewhere. Funnily enough, the biggest community of ex-Chagosians live in Crawley, near Gatwick Airport. I always assumed that they flew into Gatwick and thought, well, that looks like a nice place, we'll stay there. But to be serious, they are still very upset by this. They want to go back to their homeland. And you're right. Basically, Keir and his mates are taking, in my view, and I think yours as well, a sort of stand against imperialism, British colonialism, giving the country back to its rightful owners. Well, Mauritius is not its rightful owner, is not the Chagos Islands' rightful owner. The rightful owners live in Crawley, but nobody's even speaking to them. Kemi, a bit of a faltering appearance there, but she did refer to Keir's sort of North London lawyer mates. And I think the villain of the story here, I mean, apart from Keir Starmer, of course, he's the villain of most stories, is his lefty mate Richard Hermer, who was made a lord. He's now Lord Hermer, in order to become the Attorney General of this country. And, I'm not the first to say this. I've seen what he stands for. I've seen what he's said on podcasts, what he's written, and what he's doing in the Chagos Islands. And he comes across as a Britain hater, somebody who wants to who's very keen on reducing, the imperial power, the outmoded colonialism of Britain. I think that's what's going on here. We have a bunch of lefty lawyers, particularly Hermer, who are keen to negotiate away Britain's power and influence on the international stage.
Yeah, well, I think that line does resonate. I think we've seen quite a few decisions coming out from the Attorney General. Things like embargoes, arms embargoes on Israel, another lefty idea. And you've got a whole question mark about who he might still be taking money from for past cases, in the sense of what's been going on there. He's refused to declare who he's been sort of getting money from in that respect, and we know he's represented or been involved with people like Gerry Adams in that sort of setup. So okay, you can take the argument, well, fine, lawyers do what lawyers do, and they have to obviously represent people, but there are choices always involved in this. You don't have to represent Gerry Adams. You don't have to push this sort of position. And I suspect the question really is, how much influence does the Attorney General have on the government's sort of legal scheduling? And is it just a case that, these two lawyers, one the Prime Minister and one the Attorney General, are using the law as a way to advance a certain agenda? And we've seen this before, haven't we, in other places, that when politics is too difficult to enforce an agenda within because people aren't going along with it, that sometimes the law is the way that you do it, and you can be very clever the way you frame certain issues and the way you put them in, and then as a result you get your way on a political point by sort of invoking the legal route. And that's the problem, isn't it? We're not quite sure what this agenda is and where it might be leading.
And invoking the law is pure Keir Starmer, I think. In fact, he doesn't understand anything that isn't basically a legal issue. He sees the world in terms of the law and what's been written in terms of contracts, etc., etc. Well, fascinating stuff on the Chagos Islands. Before you go, Alan, just quickly, because this is sort of the arena that interests the Henry Jackson Society. Did you see I got the name right there? I didn't say the Alan Jackson Society. I'm getting better. I'm getting better. But seriously, Elon Musk sent in a bunch of university-aged tech prodigies over the last couple of days, and basically USAID, the American equivalent of the foreign aid budget and project in America, it's been closed down. In fact, it will be closed down totally on Friday, 2 days' time. These guys are called the Muscovites. They're all aged between 19 and 24. But it's not so much them that I'm interested in. But they are driving a truck through America's $60 billion a year plus foreign aid budget, because I think basically what the Trump administration is saying is, look, we're all for generosity, we're all for helping developing nations, but people in America are struggling. This is a cost of living crisis, and we don't feel it is right to take their tax money and spend $60 billion of it on foreign countries. And I've got a lot of sympathy for that. And why don't we do the same here? Our foreign aid budget is £15 billion a year. This year, by the way, it works out at 26.6 billion, because we're giving an extra 11.6 billion pounds to foreign countries, developing countries, for green projects. So we're sending 26 billion pounds abroad, to help lesser nations, if you like, to help them fight poverty, climate change, all that. When people are struggling here, when we have a government that says, oh, we've got a £22 billion financial black hole left by the Tories. Well, you could have plugged that with the 26 billion quid you're sending abroad. I mean, hasn't America got a point? I mean, why are we doing this? People don't like this foreign aid budget.
Well, so firstly, I'm not sure he's going to shut it down completely, in the sense that there is going to be foreign aid in the future, but it's going to be very different the way it's organised and coordinated. And by the way, that was what we've been trying to do here as well. And what I mean by that is that you'll recall we used to have a separate department for international development, right? And that department, DFID, remember DFID?
Yes, of course.
Was then rolled into the Foreign Office because the previous government recognised that it was madness to be doling out money around the world to countries that were opposed to Britain in various places. And there was no linkage between strategic aims of the country and the money we were doling out. Now, the Americans are, I think, undergoing a similar process now. I think, Marco Rubio, when the decision was announced, said there will be foreign aid in the future, but it's going to be tied to, does it help America? Is it going to be in America's interest to do this? And, do those two things marry when we're giving out the money going forwards? So why do countries give foreign aid in general? They do it because they recognise that there is a value sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, in cutting off problems at the source before they become big problems, then come to your borders, basically. And I'm specifically referring to migration. So if you can calm down a civil war, for example, then you stop migration, which comes to you ultimately, eventually. And so on and so forth. The value of it is there, but it has to be tied in to your strategic objectives for your country. You can help people and also help yourself at the same time. And I think, fundamentally, I think people both here and in America understand that bit. They don't understand when you're giving money firstly to countries that have got space programs. What on earth are you doing? Giving our tax money to countries that are putting rockets up, into space. That's ridiculous. And also they can't understand when people who hate Britain or hate America get money from Britain and America. Now they understand it. People who love Britain and America and there's a real strong rationale for doing it. They get that bit, I think, and that's really what Trump, I think, is going to sort out and do, and that's clearly what we must be doing as well.
Just a last point, and by the way, I must get your reaction to the fact that among USAID's generous gifts was apparently under Biden was a $50 million worth of condoms to Gaza. The mind boggles. But just a last point on Britain's foreign aid budget. I can't get my head round what seems to me to be the lunacy of the fact that this government is borrowing more money than ever before, in the history of this country. Our debt mountain is just astronomical now. It's borrowing more money than ever before. So it's borrowing all this money to give loads of it to foreign countries. Could you explain the logic of that to me at all, Alan?
Well, let's put it this way. You're talking about a much bigger problem than just the foreign aid budget. The amount of waste in government across the board is huge. And the reality is that, you could, if you want to take an axe to foreign aid budget, you could do. But in reality, you should be taking the axe to many, many different departments in order to get this kind of debt spending under control. And that is what Donald Trump is doing. If you look at what Doge is going to do, one of the things to look out for is this sort of mooted plan to abolish the Department for Education. Now, people are going, what do you mean to abolish the Department for Education? That means that there'll be no education. Of course it doesn't mean that. It means that they're going to take a massive bureaucracy, slice away the fat, and return it to delivering educational outcomes for children, which is what they should be doing. And if we were to take a similar approach and that implode a lot of these things and then rebuild them the other way, we would actually get much better outcomes. Because you can't reform these bureaucracies. They're impossible. You've got to blow them up and start again.
Yeah, but Keir Starmer and his gang, they love bureaucracies and they won't be doing that. But wise words from you, Alan, and very good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Alan Mendoza, their Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Let me know what you think about the lunacy. This Chagos, he's right, by the way, what Alan said. Keir Starmer indicating today in Parliament, if this is true, it's outrageous, that there are secrets that we don't know about the Chagos Islands that mean it is right to hand them to a country that's never had sovereign control of them before and is 1,300 miles away. If there are secrets that we don't know, that's outrageous. But I suspect Alan's right. There aren't any. He just wants to do it because he doesn't like empires, doesn't like colonies, that kind of thing. Let me know what you think about that and other issues. 0344 499 1000. Your calls next and for the rest of the show, so stay tuned.
And so now we have this juggernaut of expert evidence from across the world that demolishes the evidence that was put forward. Let's be absolutely frank. And so it's the rate of the evidence, Court of Appeal, that is so strong now. It matters not that this didn't happen at the trial. We've got to deal with the situation we're in now. And this evidence says, look, you know, she did nothing wrong.
Welcome back. Right, I made a couple of your messages. This is Stuart. Stuart says, compare the amount of foreign trips Trump has made in his first month compared to Starmer. It's clear where each of their priorities reside. That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm right in saying that Trump is yet to go abroad. He's concentrating America first. America first, as he likes to say. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I wish we had a Prime Minister who said Britain first. He says Britain last. He really does. He hates this country. I mean, is our Prime Minister broke the COVID laws, hates Britain. Not exactly what you want to see on the CV of a Prime Minister of this country, is it? Honestly, I think the sands of time are running out for this guy. This is from Sally on the Isle of Lewis. Is that in Scotland? Is that right? Am I? Yes, yes. It's up north, isn't it? I think. Geographical brilliant genius here. This is from Sally on the Isle of Lewis. Regarding the redefining of the word Islamophobia, which, by the way, I agree is not a word. Why the hell are our politicians changing the definitions of words? Very good point. Why are they doing this? Isn't that the job of academics in language? No, not really. I don't think it's anybody's job to change words. Compilers of dictionaries, they've got to keep an eye on it. I agree with that. And as for Bridget Phillipson, that's the Education Secretary, and her desire to curb free speech, these morons make me furious. Thank you, Sally. The Isle of... Where is it? Can someone tell me where the Isle of Lewis is? Is it in the Hebrides or something? I'm getting no help here from my top team. They're not even looking at me. I'll find out. But anyway, Sally, thank you very much for your message from the Isle of Lewis. And what we got? Yeah, Sally from the Hebrides, isn't it? That's Sally from the Hebrides. We've had her on before. She's changed the goalposts and she's now saying Lewis. So yes. Good to hear from you again, Sally. Thank you. I'll come back to some more messages in just a little while. But in the meantime, let's go to the phones and let's talk to Janice in Essex, who wants to talk about the Chagos Islands. Welcome to the show, Janice, or should I say welcome back to the show? It's always good to speak to you. What do you want to say about the Chagos?
Yeah, I love you. I love you, Kevin, and I love Betsy. Well, you know that already, bye. But I don't understand what is going on. You're my two favourite people, so I'll say no more on that. You both talk sense, so I don't understand what the heck is going on. Why is he doubling the money? Why?
What, they didn't even... You see, I don't get...
$9 billion, he wants to double it.
Well, 18 billion
Why?
we're going to give them.
Yeah.
You know, this is because Mauritius doesn't particularly want them. We're going, here, have the Chagos Islands. They go,
it doesn't even belong to them.
You know,
it's French.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. Well, they're not even French. They've been independent for a long time. The last people to rule them in terms of imperial colonialism was France. It was never Mauritius.
Say that word. It's a dirty word around English, isn't it?
That's what Keir Starmer said. Colonialism. No, it's ridiculous. It's mad. But I think it is just a bunch of left-wing North London lawyers, including him and our absurd Britain-hating Attorney General Lord Richard Hermer, who just want to give this territory away because they don't like colonialism, they don't like imperialism. They see these islands as a symbol of our evil colonial past, and that will reduce the power and influence of this great country on the world stage, and I don't want that. Do you want that, Janice?
I think he's going around the world stage. He'd rather go walk around the world stage and be in this place.
I know.
He hates this country.
Yeah. All the world's a stage for him.
What is that man doing?
Yeah. Actually, do you think we could...
Nothing for this country.
He doesn't like this country. That's why, Janice. I think we should, next time he goes on one of these long-term trips to somewhere like, I don't know, the Solomon Islands. Didn't he go there recently? Just get him a one-way ticket, shall we? Janice, always good to talk to you. Got to move on, though. Keep in touch, though. Janice in Essex. My God, we've got a lot of WhatsApp voice notes tonight, so I better start the ball rolling in that respect. Let's get going with Bill on Keir Starmer.
This guy is an absolute nightmare. The press and the media and BBC and all the rest of it were all over this when Boris was accused of doing things. Now, the Board must have been involved in Boris getting caught with this. Who took the pictures? Who did the reports? Yet they were very silent about Starmer, obviously. They must have known, somebody from the Board must have known, that this voice coach was going to visit him. Ultimately, the Board is extreme left, and I hate the guts of them.
That's a great WhatsApp voice note, Bill. Thank you very much for sending it. Keir Starmer and the Labour gang. Keir will tell... No rules were broken. No rules were broken. He's going to keep saying that like a sort of vocal tick. I can tell you, no rules were broken. God, he should get his money back on those voice coach lessons, shouldn't he? But they were. They were. He'll keep saying that. I don't believe him. I don't think you believe him. No one believes him. You did not need a voice coach to break the COVID regulations, to break the lockdown regulations, just to make your speech a little bit better. So you're about to deliver some boring diatribe about your response to Boris Johnson's leave deal. No rules were broken. Keep saying it, Keir. The more you say it, the less we're going to believe you. You're a liar. You're a liar. Anna, now, what's that voice note on Starmer's voice lessons?
Kev, why should I anymore follow rules inflicted on me by a man that utilises them to punish British citizens for freedom of speech and doesn't follow them himself? Why should I pay my local authority, but that I'm not allowed to vote on? They've just cancelled our May elections. Why should I or any of my friends, family or fellow citizens continue to follow the corrupt, bent law of this country? Someone explain it to me.
Anna, that was good. I couldn't agree with you more. That's the problem with the way this government is behaving. That's the problem with this lying, conniving Prime Minister of ours. That the more he twists the rules, breaks the rules, bends the rules, lies to us, and then calls us all far-right thugs, it erodes our trust in the state and the people who run the state. It will be socially destructive. That's how bad this government is. Let's do a quick last voice note before we return to the voice notes, because I've got a few more and I always promise to play them all out. So I'm a man of my word, said no one ever. No, I am a man of my word. And here is James again on the voice lessons.
Hello, Kevin. It's Zippy here, and I wanted to reveal today that it's me that was Keir's voice coach, and you can't arrest him because I'm not human, so I wasn't breaking any rules. He's one of my best students, so you should stop being so horrible to him.
Oh, thank you very much, James. Yeah, imagine that, was he getting voice note lessons in how to talk the way he talks? No, you said that normally. No. Don't forget to talk right through the back of your throat and your nose. Like this, fix it. So he goes, is the voice coach. OK, let's try this. Say fixing the foundations. Keir Starmer. Fixing the foundations. No. Much more nasal. Fixing the foundations. Much better. That's it. That's what we need. Fixing the foundations. To the far right thugs. Oh, you're on a roll, Keir. Great lessons. Is that what that woman Leonie Manager was teaching him? How to talk like a nasal dirk. Anyway, we better come back to the phones, and then I've got some more messages to play a bit later. But first, let's talk to Herbie in Harrow. Hello, Herbie.
Yes, good evening, Kevin. Since when has a crime got a time limit on it of 3 years, please? Can you explain that to me?
Well, there are quite a few. Well, there are statutes of limitations on various offences.
Very convenient.
But the COVID restrictions, they come under a special law, so they did say 3 years and then no more COVID convictions. I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy for that, because I don't think anyone should ever have been convicted of breaking those ludicrous, stupid rules that didn't work. But they were, and I certainly don't want people convicted of them all these years. Hence, although I wouldn't mind seeing the Prime Minister in court. I think the issue here is, realistically, you know, Herbie, I know, everyone knows, he was never going to get arrested or investigated by the police. He's the Prime Minister. He wasn't going to stand in the dock at a magistrate's court. But I think the good thing that has emerged from this, I had a caller earlier on who said, well, he's been tried in the court of public opinion and he's been found guilty. So we all now know, no ifs, no buts, this guy broke the lockdown rules, and when he tells us he didn't, he's lying, right?
True. The other thing is, Kevin, I'm trying to organise a march, a people's march, for this undemocratic government that we now have, that's ruining our lives, that's making me very angry, because every time he opens his mouth, something spurts out of it that makes me even more frustrated than I am. I can't believe this man and this government, how bad they are. They're wasting and spending our money, giving it away to everybody else, but they can't afford to keep our own safety, our own people, and our own people happy. What's the matter with this man?
I know. It really is frightening. I mean, he is incompetent, corrupt, a liar, and as you say, he prioritises foreign countries, foreign people over Britain and British people, and I think that's kind of wrong, to say the least. Herbie, great call. Thank you very much, Herbie in Harrow. Let's go to break. More calls, more WhatsApp voice notes after these messages. Welcome back. More calls in just a little while. First, though, WhatsApp voice notes. Here's Steve on migrant benefits.
These migrants' PlayStations, right, are we paying for their games as well? Because anyone who's got kids knows they ain't bloody cheap. My 2 kids have taken to me to cleaners over the years. It's monthly subscriptions you have to have for them as well. They're like 20 quid a month. The games are like 30 quid for a crap one, 75 quid for a good one. So unless they're going to sit there and look at a blank screen, I take it that we're paying for them as well.
Steve, you can count on it. Of course we'd be paying for their games as well as the actual PlayStations. We give them anything they need. All of their desires and needs paid for, funded by us, the long-suffering British taxpayer. Unbelievable. Quick one from Claire on sickness claims. We were discussing that earlier in the show.
Evening, Kevin. I believe that our left woke establishment are so stupid that they do not realise that giving everyone the benefit of the doubt over sickness claims are going to go bust. Our hardworking and tax-paying citizens are being put on more and more to pay out. Something has got to give. I predict that the underdog citizens will give more than they can take, and civil disobedience will pour out onto our streets, but not before our socialist councils and government put our country into free fall and uncontrollable recession.
Claire, you're not wrong there. There's a very real danger this country could be plunging towards bankruptcy because of our benefits bills. I said earlier, there are 9,300,000 working age adults between the age of 16 and 64 who are not working, many of them getting lifelong benefits. We're signing off. We've got assessors signing off people for life, you know, in their 20s. No, you're all right, you never have to work. You can get benefits for the rest of your life. And the assessment's made on the phone. You know, there are loads and loads of lead swingers, skivers, liars, you know, who are getting lifelong benefits because we just don't have any kind of stringent checks on whether or not they're swinging the lead. This is with all due respect to people who deserve lifelong benefits, you know, disabled people, people who genuinely deserve them. Loads of people are getting money that don't deserve them. Right, let's go back to the phones. Let's talk to William in Dundee. Hello, William.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm all right. What can I do for you?
What it is dodgy care, Kev. This guy was head of the procurator. He was taking people to court. He was doing dodgy deals behind the scenes probably as well. You know,
well, we don't know that, but he was director of prosecution, public prosecutions, I believe, from 2008 to 2013. He says
maybe we should ask people that he's maybe done the dirty on in that. So I'm not saying he has, but maybe if there's people out there, ask them to come forward.
I'll tell you one thing, William. I'll tell you one. When he was director of public prosecutions, the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, effectively, it was a good time to be a member of one of those rape gangs, those grooming gangs, because from 2008 until 2013, when Keir Starmer was the DPP and thousands of vulnerable young white girls were getting raped and sexually assaulted by mostly Muslim Pakistani men across the country, none of them, not a single one, was prosecuted.
Yeah, because the police were too scared to approach them.
Yeah, well, he was the DPP. He was too scared to prosecute them by the sound of it.
Terrible, isn't it?
Yeah,
and we've got this guy in charge of this country. Let's get him out. Let's start the campaign.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm right behind you, but how do we do it, William? How do we do it?
Well, let's get you guys up in Scotland. SNP are collapsed. I was a big SNP fan. There's no party up here to represent the Scottish people anymore. No. So we need reform in Scotland now, mate.
Yeah, well, that's yes. You know, certainly Reform UK seem to be answering a lot of people's prayers politically. The main parties are not, and certainly not Keir Starmer. Good point, William. Thanks for calling. Call me again. William in Dundee. Better go back to we've only got a couple more to go now. WhatsApp voice notes. Jerry, again on those sickness claims.
I have depression. I'm on medication for it, and I work 60 hours a week. I pay roughly £15,000 to £20,000 in tax per year, and also I have got severe arthritis in both knees. I'm currently 50 years of age, and I work as a night shift electrician. So if I can do it, I've got no idea why these malingerers can't go out there and do it. Just absolutely shy. No reason for it whatsoever.
Well, that's it, Jerry. That's because you're a decent guy and you want to work and you understand the value of work. It's not just about money. It's about self-respect. The 9,300,000 who are not working, many of them don't understand the value of work, don't want to do it. Basically, they're lazy. Not all of them, but loads of them are lazy. It's as simple as that. Let's go back to the phones. Let's talk to, well, all I've got here is, oh, is it Les in Cheshire, yeah?
Hi, Kev, how you doing?
I'm all right, mate.
Yeah, I was looking at...
Hang on, Les. Hang on, Les. It's a terrible line. We'll call you back. We'll go to break and we'll get Les from Cheshire back after these messages. Stay tuned.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Welcome back. One last WhatsApp voice notes from, well, a lot tonight. So thank you very much. Keep sending them in. I love to play them. And as I always say, I promise to play them all out. Probably one night I get 1 million or something. And won't be able to, but I will always do my best. And this is certainly the full ticket tonight. This is from Rachel on the Chagos Islands.
I think that it's Keir Starmer's fault that Donald Trump and America are going to take Gaza. Keir Starmer gave away the Chagos Islands and by default Diego Garcia, which is the most important strategic American base there is in that region. So because Trump has lost that, he's moving in on Gaza as another strategic point to replace Diego Garcia. It's Keir Starmer's fault and his stupidity in giving away the Chagos Islands.
Welcome back. Thank you very much, Rachel. A very good point on the Chagos Islands. It's absolute insanity. I mean, God knows what the hell he thinks he's doing. As I say, indicated today in Parliament that maybe there's some kind of secret we don't all know. That would be a scandal anyway if he's keeping secrets from the people. That's not democratic, but I suspect he's not. He just wants to give them away because he doesn't like colonialism, imperialism, British imperialism. He's a silly old hippie, isn't he? Honestly, grow up. Right, let's go. By the way, Petria's going to be in a second to tell you what she's got lined up for your entertainment from 10 p.m. until 1 a.m. So stand by for that. In the meantime, let's go to the phones and talk to Richard, who's in Arsenal, London. Are you in the Gunnersbury area? Is that right, Richard?
I'm actually what used to be known as Highbury.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
Just down the road from Finsbury Park Moss.
Arsenal fan, are you?
I am, I'm sorry.
Well, I'll forgive you that. But you want to talk about the voice coach?
Well, I just think it's like he's the worst politician, I think, in history of time, and he's certainly got.
I agree.
He's certainly got the worst voice. The idea that he needs a voice coach. I mean, who was his voice coach? Mr. Blobby. I mean, it's like I said earlier. It's like I said earlier that I've just got this kind of image that he's actually been taught to speak like that. That he started these voice coach lessons, sort of speaking totally normally. You know, how would you, Mr. Starmer? How would you say fix the foundations? Fix the foundations? No. Much more nasal. Fix the foundations. That's it. Spot on. It's awful.
It's a ridiculous voice, isn't it?
Yeah. Starmer's got so many plums in his mouth that when he goes to Sainsbury's, to the fruit and veg store, the store detectives stop and search him. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think his voice coach came from the same company who advised the Titanic on iceberg management. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's terrible.
The captain of the Titanic who went to lessons on how not to sink the ship. Yeah. And do you think that Rachel Reeves, this is mine, do you think that she actually is doing a constant impression of Keir Starmer? Because she speaks like this as well, doesn't she?
Yes, she does. Yeah. I think it must have. And of course, Sadiq Khan, he can't finish a sentence. You kind of need subtitles, don't you? Really, whenever he speaks. I mean, they really are the most poorly prepared. It speaks volumes that these people were in sort of opposition for sort of 14 years. But the reality is, Kevin, that they haven't even learned the lessons of Tony Blair and even trying to be pro-market and kind of pro-enterprise. They really are a bunch of troglodyte left-wing socialists. I mean, it really, It's
you're right. It's what I always say. They're 14 years they were in opposition and they sat there thinking, you wait till we get into power, we're really going to be brilliant. They never thought about what they were actually going to do, and now they're in power, they're all at sea and they're completely clueless, and it's a catastrophe, it really is. Richard, good luck with Arsenal. God knows you're going to need it. Thank you very much for an excellent call, and call me any old time. Quickly, let's talk to Jackie in London, who wants to talk about the voice coach as well. Hello, Jackie. Well, I think, we're not supposed to say that kind of thing. I'm not going to argue with you.
He's causing the country to have depression. I've never felt so depressed in my life.
He is depressing. I was thinking about this last night, and I was watching Trump at that press conference, and you might not agree with Trump, you might not like him, but there's a dynamism, there's an excitement about what he says. He talks up his country. He came in saying America great again, America first. And what have we got? We've got a bunch of boring little sixth form student politics activists who just talk the country down and depress us all. It's horrible, isn't it?
At least Trump is sitting behind his desk sorting his country out.
Hey, well, I've got a lot of time for Trump. I wish we had a Trump here. Instead, we've got a chump, and his name is Keir Starmer. Jackie, thank you very much for a great call. Call me again very soon. That was Jackie in London. She's here. It's Petri Huskin. How you doing?
I think the main thing is we need this voice coach name so that nobody else uses it.
Leonie Mellinger.
So nobody uses her.
It's Leonie Mellinger.
Oh, is it?
Leonie Mellinger.
Yeah, I don't know what she's taught them. Yeah. And Rachel Reeves. Did she go to the same one?
It's a very good... Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. Do you think Rachel Reeves just does a constant impression of Keir Starmer?
They are the worst public speakers I've ever known.
And this voice coach, Leonie Mellinger, this can't be good for business.
This is not good for business.
People are going, well, what did you teach him?
Yeah. How many lessons did he have? And
fixing the foundation.
Oh, it's awful, awful. Anyway, she's in trouble now. She's not going to be happy with that publicity. Right, coming up with me, I'm going to be looking, as I know you have, at the proposal to own Gaza and just how people in the region are feeling about that particular absolute nonsense. So we'll be talking...
It's not entirely nonsense. It's a new approach to an intractable problem. I don't think it's all going to come off.
It's definitely
but it's about time we had a new narrative. I mean, all those tired old...
A new narrative that involves displacing 2.1 million people is not a narrative, is it really? It's just nonsense. So there's got to be something else. That is just ridiculous.
Have you seen Gaza lately?
Yeah, I have.
Well,
and I've been in war zones, so I know
Wouldn't they like to go and live somewhere else?
But they don't want to.
I would if I was there.
They don't want to.